Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of This World. I'm Jamie Hanshaw, and Rachel Wilson is back for an encore. And today we are going to be talking about the one and only Britney Spears. But before we get to Britney, I wanted to bring up the newest thing that I heard about Amber Heard because this dovetails perfectly into what we're talking about with Britney Spears. So apparently, Amber Heard is some kind of Ghislaine Maxwell of Hollywood procuring young girls for eyes wide shut type parties where she sits on a throne with her legs spread open and dot dot dot. You can use your imagination from there. Some pretty strange, weird, disgusting Hollywood rituals going on. And so this is the kind of stuff that poor Britney has been brought up in. We have this theory that Britney's career is a perfect case study of trauma-based mind control in the entertainment industry.
She's iconic, like you were in our generation, she was everywhere all the time, in every commercial, at every Super Bowl, like her videos, everything. It's just like a major part of pop culture history.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't even know how deep the Britney rabbit hole goes and how connected she is.
And the first time I ever heard of trauma-based mind control was in regards to Britney Spears. It was a video called Britney and Anna Nicole and Mind Control by Freeman on the internet. And this was circa like 2007.
Yeah.
Or 2008. So very, very early on, he at least was catching on to this and a couple more people, but we always use Britney as this, case study and following her career. And it just, things just kept getting more confirmed that we were right.
Yes.
Because this was the time when she was like shaving her head, and we're going to get into that story in detail. But the programming was starting to break down around 2008. She has been done dirty her whole life.
Oh, yeah.
Her from the quality of what they give her as far as like music and costumes and stuff like that. I think she could have done so much better artistically if she had had more say in what she was performing and doing. The story that they tell you is that her family didn't have any money, but to put your kids in all of these pageants, all of these classes, artistic schools, gymnastics, vocal coaches, what else?
Yep. She did dance, gymnastics, singing classes. She went to one of the most prestigious gymnastic camps in the world, which was Bella Caroli's gym, which in the 80s, when Mary Lou Retton and all the American gymnasts were really popular, his camps were like people would have to audition from around the world to get into them, and they were very expensive. But she went to some of Bella Caroli's camps. She went to a prestigious performing arts school in New York. She went to a private school back in Louisiana. And her parents were like, her mom and her sister had to keep an apartment in New York for a while her dad and brother stayed back home in Louisiana. This is all very expensive. They were also doing giving her braces and cosmetic dentistry when she was like 8 or 9 years old. It's very expensive. And what you always hear is like her dad, didn't make much as a construction worker and didn't really keep jobs very well, had a lot of trouble with alcoholism, and her mom just like was a teacher kind of intermittently here and there. So where did they get the funding to turn her into this little child star? And it seems like they invested a lot in making her into something.
Yeah, so we have footage of her as a little girl singing on like the Ed McMahon. What was that one where you get 5 stars?
Star Search.
Star Search, yeah. So she almost won Star Search, and you're right. If you watch that clip, you can hear her belt it out. Very professional and mature sounding, nothing like what she sings like today.
Yeah.
So they really ran with the Lolita sex kitten programming on her.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean, her first record deal she got at 15, so she
mhm,
wasn't very old. I think Baby One More Time came out and got really huge when she was 17,
mhm.
so she was still underage. And now that I'm in my 40s and I go back and see some of the interviews that were done with her at that age with famous people like Matt Lauer and other big interviewers, just right around that time, like 97, 98, 99, the questions that the media would ask her, now that I'm older and I'm a mom and I see it, it's so disturbing. They're like asking her, is she going to stay a virgin? Has she had sex yet?
There
Who's
was
she
like
sleeping with?
a countdown to her 18.
Yeah,
Right now she's legal, as in
right.
yesterday she wasn't, and now today it's
Yeah, go
legal.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just really, really inappropriate stuff. And they'd ask her, like, do you like dressing sexy? Is that your idea? Is somebody making you do it, or do you like it? And of course she would say, oh yeah, it's my idea. I liked it. But the thing that's going to become a theme throughout this whole thing is what she says and does publicly, how much of that was she put up to, how much of it is true and like honestly coming from her, and how much of it is coming from the people who were handling her. It's clear she's been handled from the time she was born, like from the time she was a toddler. She's had people working her, putting her to work. Like I remember reading about how when she was on the Mickey Mouse Club in 1993, 94, that those kids made like 125 bucks a week. It was not a lot of money.
Mhm.
And they had like 10-hour days on the set filming and things like that. And it's like she was always traveling and working and practicing and performing from the time she was 3 years old. So I don't
Mhm.
think she's ever known anything else. So you have to remember that this stuff started with her as a little kid. And that when you're a little kid, you don't have any agency, you don't have any say so over anything. You'll just,
You just want to sing and dance.
yeah, and you learn to do whatever gets you the most like approval
Mhm.
and pats on the head, and whatever is going to get you your needs fulfilled as a child is what you will do to survive. So
Mhm.
programming people as a child is like a really key component to remember when we're talking about Monarch programming or mind control programming, is that they most often start these kids very young. They seek out victims when they're very young. And she does fit the profile as a child because her parents had a very troubled marriage. They kind of broke up or filed for divorce and things like that a couple times, but they kind of stayed together. Everyone knows that her dad has had a lifelong alcohol problem. That's pretty common knowledge. They did not have a lot of money. And I think a lot of people in the record industry, we're talking about like LA and New York and these billionaire record moguls, they see this like what they would consider a poor white trash family, right?
Right. Exactly.
And they're like the perfect people to take advantage of.
How professionally groomed was she from a young age? Because if you read about these things, like for instance, Kinsey had a group of child molesters that he worked with that were known, you know, convicted people. And he used those people for research and he gave them stopwatches. He says, if you're going to do it, then collect some data on
Yeah.
it and give it to me. So we know this type of grooming happens.
Yes.
And especially in the case of Jamie Spears, the dad, any person who will like molest their child, there's nothing they won't do. They'll sell them to whoever, they'll take the
Yeah.
money. It uh you don't even have to bribe them. We were talking about maybe they had something on him or
Yes.
whatever, but I don't even think that he needed that much goading. They probably just offered him a little bit of money. He's sure, take my kid.
Yeah.
And as we're finding out now, and he's kept her in this conservatorship for over a decade, he is a villain. And this is coming straight from Britney Spears herself.
Yeah.
She hates her family, most of them, and blames them for a lot of bad things that have happened to her.
Yeah. And it wasn't even just Brittany. Her younger sister, Jamie Lynn, started also, they got her into showbiz right away and put her in a Nickelodeon show called Zoe 101. She was discovered by Dan Schneider, who's a director for Nickelodeon, and he's produced most of the big shows that were like teen tween hits, like iCarly, the Amanda Bynes Show, Drake and Josh, all of these like late 90s, early 2000s big Nickelodeon hits. And it has since come out that Dan Schneider is a very creepy person. Jeanette McCurdy, who was on iCarly, has come out with a book just now talking about Dan Schneider and how creepy he was.
Is
Ariana
he
Grande
like
was
chunky
there.
guy with the curly hair kind of?
He's like a chunky guy, and he's kind of got long hair. He looks kind of like Horatio Sands
He
from
looks like a
Saturday
sweaty
Night Live.
nerd that likes anime and little girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he kind of is. Like there's this clip I saw where he's behind a camera and he comes up to Ariana Grande and a couple of the other kids that were working on Victorious, I think it was. And they're sitting on the floor, and as soon as they see him approach, Ariana Grande immediately pulls her skirt down over her legs and looks nervous. And he would famously take pictures of all their feet all the time and even post them to social media, which now he's like, oh, that's not creepy. I think their kids' feet are cute. There's nothing creepy about it. But they have, some of these kids have come out and said that he would do super inappropriate things, ask them to put on bikinis so he could take pictures, and other things like that. Some of them say there's worse things, but that they can't say them for legal reasons. But all of the most of these kids have gone on to have like issues, problems, trauma. Like
I was just
both of the kids from Drake and Josh have had some issues. Amanda Bynes notoriously has had tons of public problems, and she strangely has also been under a 9-year conservatorship herself that I believe she just got it dissolved right after Britney. So once they dissolved Britney's last year, she moved at the beginning of this year to have hers dissolved as well. And she has said that this guy is a creeper. And when the way that they got her into a conservatorship is almost exactly like what happened to Britney. There was like some incident she did that was mildly illegal, like she set a fire in a driveway or something. After having all these issues for years and being in and out of rehab, that's another theme that you guys will notice. They're constantly putting these kids away in rehabs, in mental hospitals, which we'll get to that. But Sam Lutfi, who was Britney's manager at the time that the 2007-8 thing happened, where the conservatorship began, where they had her committed and got the conservatorship instituted while she was locked up in a psych ward. They did the same thing to Amanda Bynes, and it was the same guy who was Britney's manager, was Amanda Bynes' manager. And he flew her to LA, basically tricked her. And when she got off the plane, they like took her into custody and put her under the California 50-51 law, where it's a 72-hour hold that they can then extend basically as long as they want to, as long as they can find a psych doctor who says that they're a threat to themselves or someone else, they can hold them. And they did the same thing, put this conservatorship on during that time. And she has also said that her father molested her as a kid, that he was abusive, and that continued once she got into the entertainment industry. And that she's been basically completely controlled since she was a child as well. So this is like a common thing that's going on. It's not just Britney. Britney's just the one that like broke it wide open.
Yeah. And we're watching this like kind of in real time, like what the person goes through in their life cycle as a Monarch programmed victim.
Monarch programming, we believe it comes out of MK Ultra. And the thing about MK Ultra is that we only have some of the documents. What we have is so bad that whatever they destroyed, you can only imagine what was in there, but you can go right now to the CIA reading room. This isn't like a conspiracy theory. You'll hear it called that, but you can go right now to CIA.gov and read MK Ultra documents. We know who a lot of the doctors were. We know what hospitals they did this through. We talked last time, I think we briefly mentioned a piece that I had done about the horrible experiments at McGill University in Canada under Dr. Ewan Cameron. He's one that we know a lot about because since that happened in Canada, the Canadian government was a bit more forthcoming, even though they knew that this was going on. They were a bit more forthcoming because they could kind of blame it on the Americans. Whereas the stuff that's happened in the United States, it's been covered up a little more. There's been a little bit more cover. So Monarch is a program that is a trauma-based mind control program. There's different levels of it. There's different, if you hear like alpha, beta, delta, different types of programming, they all fall under this trauma-based mind control, and things such as ritual abuse, occult and magic type of methods, and then lots of different types of drugs or substances, as well as hypnosis, are used to groom a child from a very young age for all kinds of things. But probably the most common one is some kind of like sex kitten type of programming, whether that's so that the person can be used as a plaything for like elites or wealthy people or others who want access to that sort of thing without getting caught, or also for purposes of espionage. This is a really old thing that goes back to even before when we think MK Ultra may have started, which is around 1950 to 1953. There may have been some programs even going on a little bit before that. We know that like people like Candy Jones, who was touring with like the USO shows and things like that, they would use her, at least she says that she was programmed this way and sent in kind of as a spy. There's been theories for decades that Marilyn Monroe was one of these people. So they'll take a sexy entertainer, program that person, control them through uses of drugs. They'll always have like a shady manager and some psychiatrists and things like that, putting them on different types of drugs. And then when those people can get into places in the world that other spies would have a tough time getting in. So you might notice that
Exactly.
a lot of pop stars, they can go tour in places where Americans are not allowed. They can go to like war zones. They can go to places like Myanmar or Burma or like Tibet, places like that where the government's a lot more careful about letting Americans in who might be spies, things like that. They can go to Korea. Like Dennis Rodman can somehow go to North Korea and just hang out and it's fine. So the theory is that these people are programmed and used to access information. They might be spies. They can even be programmed assassins. And there's a lot of layers to this, but that's like the basic overview of what Monarch programming is. And it usually starts with somebody young and vulnerable. They select victims that would be easy to control, where they're a child and the parents have some sort of vested interest in allowing the child to be used for this purpose, whether it's that the parent is already abusing the child and they say, hey, we know you're doing this, and if you don't let us use your child too, we are going to go to the police or we'll arrest you or we'll press charges.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that they caught the parent with some inappropriate materials concerning children that should not be in their possession. And they say, hey, if you want to avoid jail time for this, you have to let us use your child. It could be gambling debt. It could be the person needs money, but they'll find someone vulnerable and somehow coerce the parent one way or another into allowing this to happen to the kid, which is very hard to imagine. I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, but who would do that? Unfortunately, we know there are people who would do that. Like you said, the Alfred Kinsey experiments were an example of that. And
that
remember,
was the 60s.
yeah, and Kinsey was funded by the National Institutes of Health. He was funded by the CIA as well.
Yes. Rockefellers
So,
and taxpayers funded this
yes.
disgusting stuff.
Yes, and we will find those same connections here to Britney. So there's precedent for this. We're not just like making it up and pulling it out of our butt. There's historical precedent for these things happening and for certain parties always seeming to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at Britney's childhood, she definitely fits a pattern of what they would be looking for. A cute, talented kid. Parents are super motivated to get her into show business. Parents might be compromised through various things that they're doing, probably need money. So that fits.
So she goes through all of this training, and then she ends up on the Mickey Mouse Club, which is the first, I mean, not the first red flag, but that's like the biggest first red flag.
Yeah, I'd say that's a big turning point.
Yeah, because here she's with, and you said this, she was one of the youngest Mouseketeers.
Yeah.
Right? And you got Justin Timberlake, you got Carrie Russell, who starred in a espionage TV show called The Americans.
Yes.
Who else was I always forget his name. He's married to Eva Mendes.
I can't remember it either, and I know who you're talking about. Couple of Backstreet Boys.
Yes.
Were going to be in that. Christina Aguilera.
Yeah.
So there was quite a few in that cast from like 93 to 94.
And you sent me this picture and it was super creepy. Like, here is the first like Mickey Mouse Club. I don't know if you guys can see that, but like,
yeah, like they look like purge masks more than they look like Mickey Mouse. And it wasn't so that was from 1930. So before the TV show, Walt Disney had Mickey Mouse clubs, and they were in towns all across the United States and the UK, and you'd go every Saturday and watch the latest Mickey animated cartoon, because Mickey Mouse had just gotten really popular in 1928 with Steamboat Willie. Mm-hmm. So all these different towns all across the country had these clubs, and they were super popular. Like some of them had, thousands of kids that were members, and they had those membership cards. Yeah. And they did get rid of those around about 1935, and you can't find out why. And it surprised me because it was so hugely successful, and all kinds of places were making all this money. It was great advertising for Disney and really getting kids into the Disney branding when they were really young. Mm-hmm. So it was odd to me that they would discontinue it only to bring it back as a show like 20 years later. Right. So don't really know what that's about, but I have some ideas what it might be about. That there might have any place that you have large groups of kids being members and things, it mm-hmm. just it lends itself to certain predilections for certain bad people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, Ryan Gosling, that's his name.
Yeah. So they do this with men too. It's they think that Monarch programming is about 70% female, about 30% male.
Okay.
From what we can kind of tell, which makes sense. But there are a couple of boys, that seem to have been involved in this stuff too. And
speaking of Monarch program, this also has some connections to bloodlines. So like Paris Hilton.
Yes.
Powerful families will have their kids in this. And because maybe they have gone through it also, the parents. So this is like a generational thing, because the monarch butterfly, the way that they migrate, they have to pass on the epigenetic memory to their children. Right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that they called it that, because that's what they were studying, was this genetic memory and how the children of people who've gone through the MK Ultra, the Monarch, are more susceptible to these techniques, more creative.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. They actually say that when they talk about Holocaust survivors too, right? That there's multi-generational trauma, that like the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, which that is just another thing. I'm not saying anything about that, but that tends to come up a lot in these circles. There's always something connected to that. And they do say that grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those people are more susceptible to trauma or have more trauma, and they think it's like an epigenetic thing. So that makes sense. I hadn't thought about that.
Because a lot of the studies that went into MK Ultra were taken from studies that happened in the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And brought over here through Project Paperclip. Yes. And people like Werner von Braun, who worked with Walt Disney, who was a Nazi rocket scientist and worked hand in hand with Disney on, I think it was Epcot.
Yes.
So you have all these weird connections that you don't think would have anything to do with each other.
Yeah. some of the MK Ultra doctors happened to be at the Nuremberg trials to be witnesses to whatever had gone on in concentration camps experiments. And of course, we were talking before this too about how the people who always say they're going to save you and protect you from this seem to always be doing exactly what it is they say they're going to protect you from. And the Nuremberg laws were instituted to try to stop medical experimentation on people without their knowledge, that you had to have informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly what came out of that was MK Ultra, which was this notorious human rights abuse, experimenting on people without their consent. They even experimented on their own CIA agents and military members and things like that. So
what we're talking about is a technique that traumatizes a person so badly that their psyche splits into different factions of personalities that can be brought forward or put back with trigger words by the person who has been administering these treatments or these traumas.
Yeah.
Right. And Britney is no stranger to different personalities. Yes. Right. We've even seen her switch on camera. If you know what you're watching, and you brought this one up, the Diane Sawyer interview, remember that?
Yeah. Yep. That was 2003. And that was kind of an infamous interview because Diane Sawyer pressed her so hard and she started to cry and get really upset. But they're talking about how she had a rough year that year because her aunt, who she was very close to, who I think was like somewhat of a protector, because she would say that like if things were bad, she could go to her aunt and be safe there. And Diane Sawyer mentions her aunt passing away, and she's very composed and she's looking at the camera and she's handling it really well. And then she asks about the aunt passing away, and she says, haven't you had, kind of a weird year? And Britney goes, yeah, weird. And when she says the word weird, she goes, oh, hi, hello, and starts looking around like this. And then all of a sudden she points her finger up like this and she goes, strong Britney. And then she immediately starts to cry and say she's embarrassed. And she's saying like, it's just weird. Her voice changes, her face changes. You can go on YouTube and see this clip. It's still everywhere. And just the comments of people being like, wow, like it's like a whole different person starts talking. And when I saw that, I had been doing some research on Britney's tattoos just to see. I know she has a Kabbalah one on the back of her neck, and so I was primarily interested in that, but found that she has one, strangely, right in her bikini area that is it's a flower. And on the inside of it's got this Chinese character that she says in media, she's been interviewed about her tattoos before, and she'll say that she thought when she got it that it meant mystery, but that she was later informed that that is actually the Chinese word for weird. So,
which was also a trigger word to her.
Yes. So if weird was the trigger word and they tattooed that on her, that is something that in a lot of the documents for Monarch programming, they say they would tattoo or brand these people with trigger words or with things that meant they were owned and that they were programmed so that other people could identify it. So like other celebrities or other creepers could see the tattoo or see the brand or see something on the person and know that that was somebody that they could use.
In the case of like Beyonce, I think she has some serial numbers on her.
So. Yeah, you said that you're going to do some stuff on her, which I'm super excited for, because they all do these big Super Bowl or award show performances that have all this crazy esoteric symbolism. And then it's so obvious that people almost laugh at it. It's like they do it right in your face so that
it's almost a parody of what they're doing, right?
Right.
So poor Britney.
Yeah. So here she is with this trigger word back in 2003.
Oh, that's
which immediately makes her say weird things and do weird things.
Yeah.
And the other tattoo that concerned me, I didn't notice it at first, but she has this tiny triangle right here on her hand. And I was like, triangle, yeah, who knows? And then I found another shot of it, and it's not really just a triangle. It is the Greek letter of the alphabet, delta. And one of the MK Ultra programs is MK Delta, which was a sleeper assassin type of a program, or the type of programming where you'd send somebody in to gather information. And if it ever came about that they were exposed and they were about to be discovered, that person had SUICIDE programming that would be triggered by that. So,
and Kabbalah can very easily be used in Monarch mind control programming, because when they are creating all of these different personalities, they need some kind of like structure to house these people inside. So
yeah.
they can use like a house, or they can use a carousel, they can use like an umbrella. And the Kabbalistic tree of life would be a perfect kind of system to house different personalities in the different sephiroths and things like that.
Yeah,
You know
that
what I
makes
mean?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this is another thing that has so much connection, because the Kabbalah Center in LA, you see Demi Moore, you see Madonna, you see Ashton, you see Mila Kunis, you see Paris Hilton, Ariana Grande, all of these people who are all in these same circles, always coming and going from the Kabbalah Center and wearing the red string around their wrist and things like that. And I mean, I've said to Jamie that I feel like Madonna is like the grande dame, like
She is
the head evil priestess of all
Mother of
this stuff.
Darkness, Madonna.
Because she is always mentoring all these people,
Yeah.
all these young pop stars and starlets. She just went to Britney's super weird esoteric wedding.
Mm-hmm.
All of these girls that end up repeatedly in these rehab centers, that's the other thing, is there's another running theme of these posh rehab centers and certain hospitals that they always will commit these girls to.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked into which ones they were putting them in, and two were well-known MK Ultra research hubs. They were McLean Hospital, and then UCLA's Resnick Psychiatric Hospital, which was run by Dr. Louis Jolyon West, who was one of the more notorious MK Ultra doctors who did really crazy experiments on animals like elephants and dolphins. He ran that psych ward, that neuro institute, for 20 years. I didn't catch it at first, because after he left and it came out about him, they changed the name. So that's another thing they'll do. They just changed the name.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked into it, and of course, it's the exact same hospital that all this stuff was being done at. And Britney had a psychiatric doctor who was her doctor once they started doing the conservatorship stuff, once they started committing her against her will to places. At first, they would send her to rehab, right? That's the trend of this. They put you in rehab for a couple weeks or a month. They say, oh, she's struggling with, substance abuse, and she's fine now, she's better. After the 2007 head shaving incident, and when she was smacking the paparazzi's car with an umbrella and things like that, and they involuntarily committed her, her doctor was Dr. Timothy Benson. This guy is a piece of work. There's a whole bunch with him. So Dr. Benson was a Harvard clinical staff guy, and he was director of two of McLean hospitals. So McLean is one of the biggest, most famous psychiatric hospitals in the eastern half of the United States, very notorious for long having been suspected. We have some confirmed MK Ultra experiments that have gone on there, but there were lawsuits through the 80s where people were alleging that they were still doing mind control experiments on patients at McLean and Bridgewater in Massachusetts, which is a state hospital that was run by McLean. So Brittany's doctor was running two of these places, and he was kind of known as he said his catchphrase was, I help the best get better. So I help people that are like elite athletes, pop stars, people who are at the top of their game, and I help them manage their mental health. And he was connected to two known MK Ultra hospitals, and he very mysteriously and suddenly died just before her conservatorship hearing, because they had been investigating his care of her.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was telling people, he's putting me on stuff that I don't need to be on. He's putting me on She said she was on such high doses of lithium that she couldn't function, which
Mhm.
is why she had right after they committed her and she did the Give Me More performance at the VMAs that was notoriously horrible, where everybody called her fat and said that she looked drugged and
Mhm.
that she couldn't dance and she wasn't moving. She said it's because they had just switched her from whatever they had her on and put her on lithium, and that
That's
she felt so drunk and like she couldn't function on it. And I did find in some of the CIA files where lithium was used in some of the MK Ultra experiments, and specifically under Monarch, to suppress alters that were trying to come out when they shouldn't.
Oh, okay.
So that's very interesting. And then this guy just drops dead unexpectedly. He was only 48 years old right before this is all supposed to go to court. And if
Mhm.
you guys Google that, it's another really weird thing about him is all his stuff has vanished from the internet. He had all these best-selling self-help books and things like that. You can't find them. They're not on Amazon.
Hmm.
His website no longer exists. It's like they scrubbed him from the internet after he died, and he had a wife and kids. Wouldn't they benefit from sales of his books still?
So that's a pretty
Wouldn't
solid connection.
Yeah, I think so. I
Oh,
mean, he was a director of two major hospitals that we
yeah.
know are connected to this because of these lawsuits.
Right.
And there's more that I could tell you about the lawsuits because there was a lawyer who brought these lawsuits who was connected to some really crazy things as well. But I don't know if you want to get into that now or later.
Let's circle back around to that when it
Yes.
happens in the chronology of Britney, because
Yes.
I feel like she's one of those that her core personality, I feel like, is a very sweet, innocent, just kind of fun-loving,
Yeah.
not dark at all. I mean, when you Madonna gives, Grand Witch vibes,
Yes.
but Britney
Totally.
Britney doesn't. She gives, I'm just a sweet little girl from Louisiana. And I think that's why people rally around her so much, with the Free Britney. And do you remember one of the first YouTubers was crying about leave Britney
Yes.
alone? Leave
Yes. That was one of the first viral YouTube videos.
Yeah.
What was that guy's name? I can't
Chris
remember it.
Crocker.
Chris Crocker. And he became kind of famous in his own right because he was
Hmm.
so upset about it.
They
So,
did a HBO documentary about like the first viral YouTube people, and he was on it, and I remember that. And yeah, so even back then, people were onto like Britney is being abused by powerful people. So we've got her life, maybe I guess all the way till she starts recording music when you said she was like about 15, 16 years old.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she comes out with her first hit single, Baby One More Time,
Mm-hmm.
and Hit Me Baby One More Time. What do you make of those lyrics?
It's like, when I'm not with you, I lose my mind.
That is a common lyric in a lot of
Yeah.
her videos and songs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it could mean hit me up,
Sure. It
but
could.
uh, in the context of what we're talking about, I'm just going to go with it and be like, this is abuse,
Yeah.
which is integral to the trauma based mind control programming. You have to abuse somebody before they can disassociate
Yeah.
and split their core personalities. So she gives in the video and she's in a Catholic schoolgirl outfit.
Yeah.
And if you read, have you ever heard of Kathy O'Brien?
I don't think so.
Okay, so she's one of the more famous people who talk about MK Ultra and Monarch programming. She wrote a book called Transformation of America. She was a presidential model, mind control slave, on the same level as like Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
Um, and she talks about her first like introduction into the program was through her Catholic church, her Roman Catholic church.
Okay.
So you've got Brittany in the Catholic schoolgirl saying, hit me one more time. Kathy O'Brien says that her formal induction into becoming a presidential model began with her first Holy Communion where she was given something called the right to remain silent. And we all know that this is an occult symbol.
Yes.
And also part of the programming is knowing when to not speak, because the secrets need to be kept.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So she received this like Rosy Cross necklace with her first communion, and her abuser said that they worked for the Vatican and now she works for the Vatican. I'm talking about Kathy O'Brien.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this like tie-in with the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican and trauma-based mind control, and we all know their reputation.
Yeah.
With children.
Well, and
Not great.
if you remember, there was at least one, if not more, of Jimmy Savile's victims who he abused in church. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the girls, it was her job to like help get the Holy Communion stuff ready. Mm-hmm. And that's when he would do stuff to her. Mm-hmm. And so she would try to wear like multiple layers of clothing and all these sort of things. But she said she had such a hard time with church ever since then, because that was how they introduced her to it. So yeah, there's definitely some precedent for that too.
And so her first video has her she's sitting there in class.
Yeah.
And waiting for 3:00. And then she goes into this fantasy of her singing, dancing, having fun in the halls with all her friends. The video gets done and the song gets done. And then like the little very end of the video is her snapping back into reality and saying that the whole thing was just a dream or a dissociation.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
So it all happened in her imagination. And this happens in, I would say, at least 60% or more of her videos.
Yes, that's
it all happened
really
in her mind.
Yeah, it's always a recurring thing that there's some wild thing that happens, mm-hmm. And then at the end she was dreaming or imagining it. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's true. I hadn't thought about that. And isn't it very strange, you guys, that just like a week or two ago, the internet phenomenon of what was her skirt, was it black or was it plaid, and the Mandela effect thing.
Yeah,
like this is a very timely stream for us to do, because even though the conservatorship ended in November of last year, there's been all this weird stuff about Britney just popping up again all over the place. Her Instagram is crazy again. The wedding was super bizarre. It's just really in the public consciousness again right now. Mm-hmm. And the Mandela effect thing with her skirt. And she even said, I think, was it on Instagram? She said even she thought it was a plaid skirt and not a black skirt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
That was weird.
Huh. Yeah. So I have this thing that I made, and this is from my book, Hollywood Mind Control. And it's kind of a matrix of all of the different monarch imagery, common monarch imagery: butterflies, kittens, occult hand signs, masks, and Marilyn Monroe impersonation.
Yeah.
And so what is the probability that all of these girls, I have Britney, Beyonce, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, and Miley, all doing exactly, do you see that grid? So you have the butterflies, the kitten, occult hand sign, bondage is another one, and then Marilyn Monroe in bondage. And I think Britney and Rihanna did a video about, I'll have to look that up real fast, but where they were in bondage. Yes. And that
well, Rihanna had a whole song called S&M.
That's right. So the monarch programming dovetails into the occult.
Yes.
And the S&M and the bondage and the dark side of sexuality.
Yeah.
Right? And you've got Britney. Do you remember that Rolling Stone cover where she was laying on the bed and she's got a Teletubby and she's on the phone like a little teeny girl, but she's in her underwear?
Yes. That was another one that caused a lot of controversy when it came out.
Because she's always been on this you know, she's the Lolita. She
Yeah.
is the baby that you can't have sex with,
Yes.
right?
And if you, yeah, like if you go back and watch all the interviews from that time period, like very mainstream, like she'd be on Good Morning America or, you know, something really mainstream like that. And it would just be nonstop questions of if she was a virgin and when she's going to have sex and all these different things. And she was just so like highly overtly sexualized from such a young age. And like now that I've had kids, to imagine being her parents and just watching those interviews happen again and again and again, like it makes me sad for her now watching it. I can't imagine being her parents at the time
It
and
is
somehow
so
talking
awkward.
myself into that being okay.
They harped on it so much and it was so awkward. And I mean, anybody can tell that a 16-year-old doesn't need to be sexualized to this. I mean, nobody does, but
Right.
especially a 16-year-old. And you don't get that way unless you've been introduced to it already,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
for sure. She would it, you're not just naturally comfortable with it. I certainly wasn't at that age.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I wasn't like, but I didn't have Instagram and all that stuff, but neither did she.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that I think people need to remember is
She's
like,
our age.
yes, she's our age. And the thing that's so disturbing is that now that we do have Instagram and TikTok, and we've had Britney and we've had Christina and we've had Beyonce, we do see 13, 14, 15-year-old girls trying to post booty pics and sexy pics online. And it's basically considered kind of normal.
Mhm.
Like nobody bats much of an eye at it
Well, and
anymore these days.
especially for these Disney girls, I'm thinking of Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, that was another one that she was, people were doing the same thing. There was a countdown until she turned 18 too.
Yeah.
That was another thing online where it was like, oh, countdown until Miley's of age type of a thing. And
Yeah.
she was really sexualized. And there's
They,
other
they did that
common,
to that poor girl from Stranger Things.
yeah, they did. My Millie Bobby Brown.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And she had some kind of weird inappropriate relationship with the rapper, I think, Drake. One of those guys was texting her since she was 13,
Yes.
grooming her for things.
Yeah, and we saw that with the Smith kids too. One of Jada and Will's kids
Mm.
did like a sexy photo shoot with the older Disney kid who was in Hannah Montana. Moses Arias, I think his name is,
Mhm.
did like a sexy photo shoot with a very underage. It was the Smith kid who did the "Whip Your Hair Back and Forth" song. I can't remember what her
Willow?
name is. Yes,
Yeah.
he did like this sexy, really inappropriate, like they're both laying in bed with their shirt off type of a photo shoot when she was like 13 and he was like 18 or 20 or something like that. But he was a Disney kid too. You know, it's like,
Why do they always have this fall? Like they are brought up as a wholesome,
yeah.
and then as soon as they get some kind of creative license, like when they grow up, then they go straight to the dark sex stuff.
Yeah, Bella Thorne is a really good example of that too. She had that show with Zendaya on Disney where they were dancers and they had a dance show.
Mhm.
And she like her Instagram is so disturbing. Her music videos that she has done are so disturbing. And she has said that she was horribly abused from a young age as well. And that Disney, like she's one of the ones that's come out and said, Disney is horrible. It's all child
Mhm.
TRAFFICKING.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, she did the same thing. She went straight to, she's the one that started an OnlyFans that set a record within 24 hours. She made like $10 million or something with her, the
Oh, dude.
right when she turned 18, like at midnight of when she turned 18, her OnlyFans went live and made millions of dollars. It's a huge industry to like, to it, because it's like the corruption of innocence, right? Like that's the thing that apparently the people want is to have these innocent young kids, and then the minute that you can't go to jail for it, instantly corrupt them, type of a thing. But that, you're right, it's always the minute they turn 18, suddenly they're doing the most dark, seedy, sexy stuff that you can get them to do.
Even to the point of like fallen angels imagery with Miley.
Yeah,
Um, do
like
you
her
remember?
can't be tamed video.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Do you remember when she dated Justin Timberlake? Britney and Justin were like the cute little it couple.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then they broke up and they were hounding Justin all the time. They're like, Justin, did you take Britney's virginity? Did you, did you, did you? And one radio interview, he actually went like, yeah, I did, you know? So it's like, Britney, I feel like she's never had any sincere relationships.
How could you? I mean, she was worth multi-millions of dollars by the time she was 17 years old. She signed this 2-year deal with Pepsi. She, like Jive Records basically owned her. There was a really obscure documentary done on her when she was in Mexico City on tour, and it was just 3 days, and it was called like The Stage, 3 days in Mexico City. It didn't even have her name in it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of been buried. You can find it now on YouTube, I think, but they originally put it as a DVD in the back of some Britney thing they put out at some point. But the woman who did that said that even then it was really clear that she was very unhappy, and that for her to even film there, Jive Records had to approve everything. So like Britney was already smoking, she was already drinking, she was 20 years old at that time.
I remember when she was smoking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they had to like, so Jive Records was like, well, you can film, but you can't show the cigarettes, you can't show any booze, you can't show her drinking anything unless it's Pepsi. She can't even have water. It
Isn't
has
that
to be
funny that
Pepsi branding.
a teenager can show it all
Yeah,
except for they smoking?
right. We don't want to show that because
Yeah.
that'll ruin the sexy image or whatever. Um, but it was like clear to that person doing this documentary that she was already completely controlled by everybody and was not there because she wanted to be or anything like that. It was just like everything. She said they had people picking out her underwear and her lip gloss. Like that's how controlled it was.
Well, even in her new Instagrams, we'll get to in a little bit, she's like she can't even bathe by herself. That's
Yeah.
how tightly controlled she is. So let's go back in time a little bit. I want to talk about the 1999 video "You Drive Me Crazy." So part of the MK Ultra Monarch programming is you're going to look crazy if you are out of line.
Yeah.
If you try and speak out and say what's happened to you, you're going to look crazy. You're going to be crazy anyways because your body and your soul is trying to integrate back together to heal. And people keep on plugging things into you, is what Brittany called it, or recalibrating you or sending you to rehab or whatever. It's going to make you crazy.
Yeah.
So she sings this song, and the video has Melissa Joan Hart, who was Sabrina the Teenage Witch, in it. And common lyrics of her songs include being lonely, losing her mind, losing her senses, and going insane. So this is what she's singing about a lot.
All the time.
Yeah.
Most of the songs. Yes.
That same year, 1999, she made this video called "Born to Make You Happy," which we were talking about before. The generational programming
Yeah.
can start before you're even born. If they traumatize your mom while she's pregnant with you, that's going to affect you,
Yeah.
right? If you're a moon child or something crazy like that.
Yeah, see, this is the stuff that you're so good at. Is like you'll watch the videos or read, and you catch like every little thing and tie it all together. And I just love listening to you do it.
Well,
But it's so true.
yeah.
It's like it's hard to deny when you have 23 years worth. No, it's more than it's 25 years worth of material to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's very hard to deny these patterns because it's like other bands have branched out and like tried other things and done other, certain other artists have branched out and tried different things. But her stuff it's so consistent all the way through her life, these same themes and these same patterns from 1998 till now. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very, very hard to just think that that's all one giant coincidence, especially when you connect it with all the other things.
Right. So in this video, "Born to Make You Happy," the video starts and she's like dreaming or dissociating on a bed made of two cubes, which you have to be a super occultist to know, like that's a Saturn and a hypercube and all that symbolism. But she's wearing a shirt covered in monarch butterflies, sitting on a double cube.
She also has a butterfly tattoo on her foot.
Mm-hmm.
And the butterfly thing comes up all the time with Britney, even just a recent Instagram posts.
Mm-hmm.
She has, yeah, show that one that I found, because you guys remember we were talking about how weird seemed to be a trigger word that she also has tattooed on her body along with the butterfly. Wait till you see this post from, it was from right before the conservatorship ended, I think last year. Yes. Stay weird.
Yeah.
And it's black and white too, which is more occult symbolism. So
right.
it's a little too much to ignore, in my opinion.
Write this down because I want to come back to it. Project Rose.
Yes, Project Rose.
So let's talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
So 1999, You Drive Me Crazy. The video with Melissa Joan Hart is a factory for mass producing pop star slaves that are automaton robotic girlies.
Yeah.
Have you seen that word?
Yes, and that's another theme that's repeated is robots. Mm-hmm. Robots or electronic people, like mass produced factories, things like that. And you see that again too.
Lady Gaga did a performance, I think it was like 2009, somewhere in there, where she actually had the slave factory falling in and then coming out on an assembly line.
Yeah, I remember that.
You'll have to look that one up because the MC was like, they're mind controlling you. It was just all out there.
Yeah.
So 2000, she does Oops, I Did It Again. And was that her second album? It was, wasn't it?
Yes.
So back to back.
Back to back mega hits.
Yeah.
Huge.
So this one is really weird because it opens up and an astronaut is on Mars. What does Mars have to do with anything? There's always so much like nuanced stuff hidden in just a stupid music video.
Right.
Because they are all pretty stupid.
Yeah.
But so an astronaut goes to Mars and he finds a Britney Spears CD in the rubble of Mars. Like an ancient civilization had Oops, I Did It Again. Like the Martians were watching this stuff. So she's on a bed with 8 pointed stars. And you came to my talk, which is really cool.
Yeah.
We were talking about Inanna Ishtar, and one of her symbols is an 8 pointed star.
Yep.
And one of her tails is her catabasis into the underworld, where she goes down and comes back up. And you see a lot of these stars go through the same process of going into the underworld, being dark, and then coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So, Oops, I Did It Again.
Oh, also at the end of that video, the guy brings her the diamond from the Titanic.
Oh,
do you remember that?
Yes.
How bizarre. But the Titanic, of course, is tied to like all of the elite banking families and a lot of that stuff, which is all tied into this too, which we'll all get to later. But yeah, it's like, so it seems so random. Like, why on earth would they, why Mars, why the Titanic?
Why is he bringing her to the heart of the ocean? She's like, I thought the old lady dropped it in the ocean at the end. And he's like,
I know.
Baby, I went down and got it for you.
I know, it's so corny, but like some of it is, it's like really corny or really campy, but then there's also all this really dark, weird symbolism.
Exactly. Campy is the perfect word to describe what's going on. So then you've got 2001. We all know what happened in 2001, right? Mega Ritual 2001.
Yes.
She sings I'm a Slave for You in 2001. Now, if this isn't telling enough, they're called Monarch mind control slaves. Like the book that you read to understand this is called How to Create Your Own Mind Control Slave.
Yeah.
And so slavery is the issue. And then she does her VMA performance of the Slave for You, where she's got that big snake on her. Do you remember that? Like,
yes, I do. The big albino python.
And I have this in my book. So here on top is a picture of a ritual from the Church of Satan. You've got the pentagram in the background. You've got the naked lady as the altar. She's putting that big python right on her shoulders. Now
I did not know that.
this is taken
That's
from a video.
nuts.
That's why it's blurry. It's taken from an old thing that got on YouTube. But she's doing the exact same thing.
She also, doesn't she start that performance in a cage?
I'm not sure.
I
Maybe
think she does.
because the whole thing is Eve and
Yeah.
Garden of Eden
Yeah.
imagery and the serpent from the Garden of
Yeah,
Eden.
because that's what it was. She's in a tiger with in a cage with a tiger.
Okay.
Or yeah, it was a tiger, I think.
So
Some kind of big cat, some kind of big kitty.
so there is her high profile ritual at the VMAs, looking like a black mass from the Church of Satan, right?
It's their favorite. It's their favorite thing to do at these big award shows and Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Is big old satanic rituals.
Which I have a whole chapter called high profile rituals. So you're not watching a Super Bowl halftime show, you're watching an occult performance. And if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
So then you've got her in 2003. She became a fully grown woman, they say, and she did this song with Madonna called Me Against the Music. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
That's one of the ones where I think the song is okay, but I hate Madonna.
Yeah.
But the song is just, it's so. That's another one where she's waking up from dissociation. The whole thing was a dream. And then in 2003 VMA, Madonna, Christina Aguilera, and Britney do this crazy performance where they were wedded to Hollywood by Madonna coming down in a top hat.
Yep.
Looking like a groom, but also looking like a master mason.
Yeah.
And they
male and female, and then they all kiss.
Yeah. And they have that big sloppy wet kiss that was really gross. And Justin Timberlake was like,
he was sitting in the audience like, he did not look happy. Like he looked like almost mad. Like he almost looked mad about it. He wasn't thrilled with it at all.
Yes. So Madonna is passing on some kind of initiation into witchcraft.
Yeah.
Live on television and having lesbian kisses.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's like both gendered, right? Because she's like a boy and a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it was like Britney's dressed up in the like a virgin outfit.
Yeah.
So, and then of course Madonna comes to her most recent wedding as well, which was also super bizarre and ritualistic. And Madonna just always happens to be at these things for whatever reason.
Oh yeah, Madonna is probably one of Britney's handlers.
That's what I think.
Yeah,
I definitely get that impression. It's like any major thing that Britney did, any major initiation of some kind, it's like Madonna's there and ready to just hold her hand and walk her right through it. It's very weird.
She did the video called Toxic.
Yes.
And she appears as different personas playing a spy in this like weird espionage scenario. She's got the red wig, the black wig, the blonde wig. She is a stewardess.
Yep.
She's an assassin.
Yeah, that one blew my mind just because of her Delta tattoo on her hand, and Delta programming being a sleeper assassin program with the dissociative identities. And she tracks down the guy and poisons him and then like jumps out of a window, which is another thing, the falling, flying, jumping out of a window type of stuff. And let's not forget that in the MK Ultra experiments, the one death that they could pin on those that we know of was Dr. Frank Olson, who they unwittingly dosed with LSD, and he jumped out of a window to his death.
Whoa. Yeah. Yeah, drugs play a big part in the MK Ultra, especially acid.
Yes.
Because they'll put the children under LSD and then make them watch cartoons and things, and they'll program them that way.
Yeah.
And then this reminded me of, do you remember Lady Gaga's video Paparazzi?
Yes, I do.
She was poisoning her boyfriend in that video while she was dressed in a Mickey Mouse costume.
Yeah. Now that I think of it, there's also a No Doubt video where Gwen Stefani is poisoning all of the guys in the band.
Oh, really?
Killing them, yeah.
What's that one called? Do you remember?
It's My Life.
It's My Life. Okay.
She's dressed like an old Hollywood movie star and killing them
Oh,
all.
and she's on trial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So then you've got 2004 video Every Time.
Oh God, that one is so disturbing. I just rewatched it yesterday and it was like, I felt traumatized watching it. That one is messed up and it's got that guy who was in every 90s video, Steven Dorff.
Oh yeah, the vampire guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of weird connections too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that video, like that's one song that I know Britney wrote herself.
Uh-huh.
It's actually a really good song and
Actually, cool.
her voice on it is quite good. It's not as much of the baby voice. It's more like her real voice, but it's super, super sad. And the video
She
is
wrote
like,
that?
yeah, she wrote that one.
Oh, that's one of my favorite of hers. Like it's a lesser known song, but it's very
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
and well written.
yeah.
So this one, she is drowning in a hotel bathtub. And in the story of the video, she gets hit in the head by trying to run away from paparazzi. And she
Yeah,
doesn't realize she's got a head wound until she gets in the bathtub and she passes out and drowns.
yeah,
And this makes me think of Whitney Houston in 2012
yes. And her daughter.
and her daughter. What the
Isn't that
heck?
nuts?
And her daughter was scared to death of baths.
I know.
So Brittany's in the bathtub. She's wearing her Kabbalah bracelet.
Yes, I saw that. I
She's
saw that. Because at first I thought there was blood on her wrist, and then I was like, oh, that's the Kabbalah bracelet.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she undergoes this kind of death in the bathtub and she's reborn as a baby in the hospital.
Yeah, and she's like all dressed in white, and they're trying to revive her, and she's actually running away from them to the room where the baby is being born in
Mm-hmm.
this white outfit. Like, I mean, it seemed really blatant to me. It's like her saying she wants to escape this life, with the paparazzi and all that.
And the
Sort
only
of.
way to escape it is by dying.
Yeah, because there's
Um,
no other way she's getting out.
right. Just like maybe Elvis faked his death to get out of being Elvis because
Yeah.
there's no other way. So this is another one where she wakes up as if it were all a dream. And then in 2004, she goes on this world tour called the Onyx Hotel.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I was just
This is
reading it
Keith
today and I thought
Brittany.
Onyx. Yeah.
Yes. So they described it as, let me read it here. The Onyx Hotel is a unique, mysterious hotel powered by an onyx stone where guests who enter shine their own light into the gemstone and make their fantasies come to life. It's a vibrant, whimsical place where wonders' dreams are realized and the darkest of secrets are revealed.
Totally normal pop
Yeah.
singer stuff.
Oh, yeah. So this tour was marketed to like a different demographic than her other tours. They were, well, her first concerts were more family friendly because they were for teenage girls.
Yeah.
But this tour was like her adult R-rated debut. And they were also heavily targeting the GAY market with this tour.
Yeah.
So then Brittany tells MTV, she says, the onyx stone is kind of symbolic of what guides me in my life. Like there's a bigger picture in everything, and there's something that guides you where you need to go. So if you look up Fritz Springmeier's super important work on Monarch mind control,
Yeah.
it's called The Illuminati Formula to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Control Slave. He says that onyx stones are used in the occult and by the mothers of darkness to capture souls. So it starts out with this guy who's the master of ceremonies, and he's like this creepy, belligerent, one-eyed cross between like Fat Bastard from Austin Powers and RuPaul. It's totally gross. And he welcomes the spectators to the Onyx Hotel, and then he throws the onyx into the video screens, causing a virtual chandelier to fall. And then Britney's face appears, and she says, once you check in, you can't check out. And this is so weird. In a pre-recorded video interlude during the concert, Jada Pinkett Smith, who knew she was involved in all this, morphs.
It does not surprise me at
She
all.
morphs
She's
through from
horrible.
another dimension to lead Britney down a dark alley to reveal a secret doorway to the Mystic Lounge. Part of their inner psyche can be the Garden of Eden.
There's a lot of Edenic symbolism, even in just like her Instagram right up till right now. Flowers, roses, butterflies, gardens, over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
In all her shirts, in her hair, in her dresses.
In that
The color red over and over and over.
in that one you
Always
sent
this
me,
color red.
yeah, she's got the flowers in her hair.
Yeah.
Project Rose.
Yes.
So, okay. Where are we? We're 2004.
One more thing about Jada Pinkett Smith that does not surprise me. First of all, everybody knows like the weird ritual stuff with Will Smith with like him punching Chris Rock. That was really bizarre earlier this year because he like insulted her and people were like, was it staged? Was it not? And then the stuff with Willow that we just mentioned of her taking the super inappropriate pictures with another Disney kid. And Jada, there was this video that earlier this year of her describing how her mother taught her to touch herself.
Yes, I saw that. So gross.
And how empowering it was that her mother taught her to do that as a way of owning her own body and like so that there was some kind of way that it wasn't other people touching her, it was her touching herself, and that this was so empowering, and that she taught all her kids to do this. Yeah. And then everybody knows about her like basically cucking Will Smith, and that being public humiliation rituals with them seems to be a big thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I'm not too shocked that she's in here somewhere.
So after this Onyx Hotel is when she starts to have like increasingly erratic behavior.
Yes.
And 2004, the media started like reporting on her bizarre behavior. She had this 55-hour marriage in Las Vegas to her childhood friend, Jason Alexander, who I heard showed up at her recent wedding.
Yes.
Trying to stop it.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these people lead normal lives where people are looking out for them.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
I think they're just all being preyed upon.
Yeah.
What year did she marry K-Fed? Do you remember? Was that like 2005?
2005 or 6.
Okay. So, well, in 2006 is when she was getting in trouble for like taking her baby on a ride with no car seat.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So the media was already turning on her, which is part of the program. The paparazzi plays into this because I think the paparazzi is funded by CIA to harass and disorient these victims.
Yeah.
And to make them feel like they're always being watched, which is part of the trauma.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about with Lady Gaga and the paparazzi video and that song, she did I just remembered she did a live performance of that song that was super graphic and weird where she had the meat. Do you remember the meat dress?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like all this blood in her performance. I forget like exactly what was going on there, but it was very macabre and very disturbing and cannibalistic for that song. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super disturbing and bizarre. And the video for that song is also just packed full of symbolism. So it's like the paparazzi definitely has to play into this. And this was, now there are laws, I guess, that they can't do what they were doing then. But back then, they could do this and totally get away with it. And they literally did follow her everywhere she went. They would endanger her. They'd jump on her car. They'd do all kinds of stuff. And she was always trying to like get away. And so she looked really crazy and erratic trying to get away from them.
So she just grabbed her baby and took off.
Yeah. And she said there was no time to like try to put him into a car seat because they were chasing her basically.
Yeah.
And that it was getting dangerous and she was worried about the kids. So it seemed like a less risk to her at the time.
She has the worst taste in men. So let's talk about K-Fed for a second.
First
And
of all, his name is K Fed.
Kevin Federline.
Yeah.
I mean, he was her backup dancer, right?
Yeah.
He had a baby mama with a baby on the way.
I know.
And then he goes and marries Britney Spears and gets her pregnant. And they make this show for MTV called Chaotic.
Yeah.
Remember, with their like home movies and stuff?
Yes.
And when you're watching this, you're starting to notice how strange her personality is, in that she doesn't remember things. So he'll be like, "Remember when we watched this movie?" And she's like, "No, that didn't even come out yet." And he's like, "That's been out for months. We watched it on the tour bus." And she's like, "No." And
Yeah.
so there's gaps in her memory, and that is a super telltale sign of abuse,
Yes.
is losing time.
Yeah.
Because when you switch
It's
alters,
abuse.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you
It's
switch alters,
abuse and
one goes down and the other comes forward,
yeah.
and the one that is down doesn't remember what happened. And that's why they
Yeah.
make such perfect assassins and couriers and things like that.
Yes. That the courier thing was a big deal too, was like using these people to transmit information and then they would not remember the information or
Mhm.
that they had given it to someone.
Exactly. And the person that receives the information has like a key code that unlocks the paragraph that they're supposed to deliver or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. And then they forget all about it.
Yeah, and like these were programs that weren't just in the United States. The Soviets had these, the Nazis had these. They were they were all doing the same type of stuff. They were all experimenting, even in Korea with mind control. Like one of the excuses for our CIA doing MK Ultra was that they believed that some of the soldiers who came back from the Korean War had been mind controlled by the Koreans because they came back like denouncing the United States and praising communism or something. But I'm working on my second book right now, which goes into the Soviet like mind control stuff and what they were trying to do and their occult black magic, weird mind control, ritual abuse stuff that they were doing. So our CIA goes, well, we only did it because we knew that they were doing it. So somehow that makes it okay, which the Cold War can be like their magic excuse for anything, right?
Oh, yeah. And this ties into Stranger Things too. So you've
Yes.
got
Oh,
the
imagine
doctor.
being me watching Stranger Things. The whole Andy's looking over at me because we just watched the whole thing when it came out in July, and he was just looking over at me, knowing what I'm thinking. I'm just sitting there going, because
Yeah.
it's like I know all the stuff that they were really up to during this time, and the things that we think that they were doing, and I'm like, this is total. It's more documentary than you would think.
Right?
That show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about the upside down a lot in reference to occultism. Universe B in Stranger Things, they call it the upside down, right?
Yeah.
Which is just the flip side of our world.
Yeah. As above, so below type of stuff.
In Kabbalah, that is known as the Qliphoth, or the dark tree of life. So
bizarre.
Yeah. Where are we? Okay, so then she poses pregnant, naked. Do you remember that picture?
Yes, I do.
That blew up the internet.
She was one of the first to do that too, and then everybody else was doing that. Like then Demi Moore did it, and a bunch of other people did it.
And I really feel bad for her because I think she just wants to be like a good mom and a wife and have some semblance of normalcy with children, because during her conservatorship, they wouldn't allow her to have children or get married.
So her having kids, I think, was a major turning point because they would use them against her. They would use them to control her. So anytime she didn't cooperate, it was, do you want to see your kids? We're going to have you. So I think, so when you said she has really bad taste in men, I think a lot of the men were planted. Like, I think that some of them were in on it, maybe even the current one, based on, at first I thought he was good and now I'm not so sure.
Oh, please, that guy?
Well, at first I was like, maybe, well, because there's something really bizarre too that I found in his Instagram, which is he always calls her his lioness. And if you look,
Ishtar.
Yes. And ancient Persia, there's tons of occult symbolism for lions, but I found one source that specifically said that lionesses are symbolic of somebody trying to like take control of their own mind or their own consciousness or their own life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they symbolize like there's some kind of symbolism with trying to gain control of your own conscious mind, which I
Mm-hmm.
thought was really bizarre. But he's always called her his lioness.
Hmm.
And he is like originally Persian, and this is all like Assyrian, you know, like Ishtar and all this kind of stuff is like all tied in with that. The lion symbolism goes very deep in the occult and in
Oh,
the
yeah.
ancient world, and even in like Egypt and Europe where there's no lions.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. And it's just like him calling her that. And then of course now he's getting these big acting roles and he's getting, you know, in these popular shows. He just did a movie with who did he just do a movie with who's a huge star? Mel Gibson. He's in a movie with Mel Gibson now. And his wedding pictures were all of him, which was really
I know.
weird. He posted all these pictures of himself.
That guy,
hot. Very weird.
I mean, does anybody actually believe he gives one crap about Britney? I don't know. I don't. I think he's a total narcissist.
I mean, even just like the videos and pictures of them, she looks very like she looks like she's frozen at 17 years old or 14 years. She's like she's trapped as a child, which is a feature of Monarch programming, is
Yes.
to have this sex obsessed like nympho type of person who also reverts back into a childlike state all the time.
Yes,
And
because at the moment that it splits, that personality stays the age.
yes.
So you can
So
have a baby alter and you'd be like, "Meh."
yeah, she just is like a little child, a
Mhm.
lot,
It
a
is.
little weird.
Wedding pictures are so cringe. Like, you know how they'll take a portrait of the bride? They didn't do that for her.
No, just
They
him.
took all these portraits of the groom
Uh-huh.
that he posted like professional on Instagram.
Yeah, there's no professional pictures of her.
Yeah, it was
No
almost like
professional.
he was the star of that wedding.
Yeah,
He was
and
just like an
the
accessory.
only clips and pictures of her, first of all, as somebody who did hair and makeup for years, her makeup is always like a 10-year-old did it. Her hair is rarely ever brushed anymore these days. She looks rough. She doesn't look like all the other starlets who, like Paris Hilton, looks frozen in time, like she's still 19 years old. Her hair is always perfect. Her makeup is perfect. Her nails are perfect. And Britney, I mean, she looks like her teeth are changing. She looks tired. She looks like she hasn't brushed her hair. She'll have extensions that clearly haven't been done in like 6 months or something that are grown out and falling out.
Mm-hmm.
It's really odd to see her in such disrepair and for a wedding. So like even at her wedding, her makeup's like she slept in it. It's under here. Her hair
always looks like she went clubbing last night and didn't wash up.
Yes, exactly. And that's what she looked like at the wedding, right? Yeah. I always say wedding because I'm like, that ain't no damn wedding. But that's what she looks like. And the only video and pictures of her are like somebody did them with their phone. And then there's all these professional shots of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's super bizarre. And it's very weird. It was like Britney didn't know any of them were coming.
She said that.
Yeah.
And her kids weren't even invited.
No.
But Madonna was invited. Here's the picture of them. You've got Donatella Versace, that like weird old hag.
Yeah. She's another one that
Madonna, Britney,
suspicious stuff.
Drew Barrymore, and Selena Gomez.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're wearing like black robes. Like Drew Barrymore is wearing what looks like black priestly robes or something. Very bizarre choice for a wedding outfit.
Right?
This is not normal, you guys. And then there's all the footage of them like dancing and she's kissing Madonna again at the wedding. There's a picture of them kissing at the wedding.
Oh, gross.
Yeah. Why are you kissing Madonna at your wedding, Britney?
Do you remember when Madonna kissed Drake on stage and he like spit it out?
No. But that's kind of cool.
Yeah. He was like, pit. Anyways, okay, so we've been going for 10 minutes and I think we're gonna have to break and do a part 2 because we have only covered not even half of this stuff.
You guys have to hear more about the connections to the hospitals. So when we say there's this pattern of putting these girls in hospitals, it's not just Britney. There's many other pop stars that they're doing this with, and there's very specific crazy things about the particular hospitals and the doctors that are common among all of them that you're not going to believe who it's tied to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Out of This World. I'm Jamie Hanshaw, and Rachel Wilson is back, and we are going to talk about, guess what? It's Britney, bitch. So to recap her childhood, she grew up in a very, very small town in Louisiana. I found a couple things about her parents' relationship that were a little telling. In the late 70s, her mom filed for divorce due to adultery. So here is Mr. James Spears, aka Janie, already showing his true colors back in the 70s. They did not end up getting divorced, but he turned out to be sort of a crumb bum.
Yeah.
And continues to be one. He is in and out of jobs. They're so poor, he's sometimes hunting critters in the backyard for food.
Yep.
Did you hear that?
Yes, they did.
That's so crazy. So she's a toddler. She goes into voice and dance. She is singing in the church choir. She's doing ballet. She's doing jazz. She's doing gymnastics. She's doing voice lessons. She's doing talent shows. She's doing dance competitions, beauty pageants, and performing on local television, all as a tiny tot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they groomed her to be their cash cow, and it paid off big time.
Yep.
And even now in her conservatorship, one interview I heard with her brother, they call managing her finances the family business. So they are all leeching off of her. I call them the helots. There's this old movie about if you start to make money, then everyone wants a piece of you.
Mm-hmm.
And this bum tells the guy, he's like, watch out for the helots. They'll be around if you make money. And sure enough, Britney has got a bunch of helots that she needs to shake off.
Yeah, so, her dad famously said in an interview that he said Britney is a racehorse and she needs to be managed like one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he thinks of her.
So she's never even been treated like a person with her own agency. It's always been she's a product to sell and make money off of. So this was really cute. She ran the cash register at her grandma's diner as a little girl.
Yeah.
So she's been groomed to be pleasing and to work hard and get it done and make the money and be as sweet and pleasing as possible, which is pretty, it's kind of tragic because those kind of people can really easily get taken advantage of.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially girls. One time when she was small, she remembers this incident where the dad tried to drive off drunk with Britney in the car, and she was only about 5, and him and the uncle got into a fist fight. That really stuck with her. The dad would break dishes and yell at the mom, so she was used to seeing these drunken, violent episodes as a child. She, performing was a type of dissociation for her. She could leave all of that behind and do her ballet or her tap dancing or her whatever.
Yeah.
Get the validation that way. She had an Aunt Sandra who she really loved and trusted that she would go to when she needed some normalcy. And part of her breakdown was when her Aunt Sandra died, and she felt like she didn't have anybody who had her best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Then she goes to New York City. She does all that Mickey Mouse stuff. She was in a play with Natalie Portman in New York City.
Yeah, I think they went to the same performing arts school.
Right. So here you've got this talent pool that grows up to be the A-listers in Hollywood. And they all have similarities in their mental health, right? That you can't deny.
Yeah. And we're going to really get deep into that in this episode, guys, because this is something that so many of these Hollywood starlets, pop star girls all have in common. And shocker, they all get sent to the same institutions.
Right? That are owned by other celebrities.
Yes.
And this just happened. Doja Cat shaved her head out of nowhere. Did you see that?
I didn't.
But I found this out. At one point, when her career is starting to take off when she was small, her dad finds out he owes a ton of money to the IRS.
Yes.
And the
I've
family
heard
goes
that too.
bankrupt.
Yeah, they declared bankruptcy right before her first album came out too.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is
Which you have to think that she had signed this record. They know it's coming out. They know it's probably going to do really well.
mm-hmm.
That's exactly what you would do. If you had a ton of debt, you'd file for bankruptcy first so that you don't have to pay off any of that stuff. And you can basically like keep all the money and start over.
Or we were kind of speculating in the last show about her childhood and how she could have been groomed for the MK Ultra program because her dad might have been compromised in some way.
Yes.
So this IRS thing was maybe another outlet for them to get to him and her.
Yes.
Right?
Could be.
That's
for
just
sure.
speculation. There's no proof. I'm just
right.
like little detectives.
Yeah.
We're putting the threads together. Mom's on the net. Right. So let's see. In 1994, girl groups were all the rage. And like they were trying to capitalize on like Josie and the Pussycats and Spice Girls.
Yep.
Come out with all sorts of girl bands. And she almost joined a group called Innocence.
Yes, I know about that one. I've actually met one of the girls who was in that group.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She's like a fitness model now. Her name's Amanda Latona, but I've met her I used to do makeup and stuff for bodybuilding shows. And I've met her and talked to her at some of those. And she talks about how happy she is that she feels like God saved her from the music industry because she found out so many horrible things. That was a band that was going to be a Lou Pearlman project. If you guys know anything about Lou Pearlman, he's the one behind like O-Town, NSYNC, and who else? There was another really big boy band. He did a lot of boy bands, and he turned out to be a total scam artist, total creeper, went to prison, died in prison, but he was very bizarre, had lots of weird connections to other famous people, very suspicious stuff like in his background, but he turned out to be like, they said he ran one of the biggest Ponzi schemes that they've ever seen through the music industry and insurance companies and all this stuff. It was like very elaborate. So she almost ended up with that creeper, but then she ended up with the record deal just for herself, which doesn't seem like it turned out a whole lot better.
No, and so she comes out overtly sexual, and her interviews during this time are so disgusting. Like the questions that they give her, I would walk out.
I would too.
But I'm a 40-year-old grown woman, but 16.
But even when I was young, like I think I would have cried because I've gone back and watched some of those, and they are so humiliating and degrading. It's like a public humiliation thing. What they did. It
really is. They like to build you up and tear you down at the same time. And this is a Monarch mind control technique.
Yep.
And the questions are just so like, why do you dress like such a slut? Are you going to have sex? Have you had sex? Just
how much are you going to have sex? Who are you going to have it with? Do you think that when you dress like this, it makes other girls want to be sluts too? Like just they're like big time journalists on big media programs asking her this in front of the whole world. And she's underage. And I'm just, now you go back and watch it. And I don't know how the American public watched it at the time and just didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember people being like, wait a minute, this is a teenage girl. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So, and I feel like the mainstream media likes to mock people from the South.
Oh yeah, for sure.
His 40th birthday, and here he is in Vegas celebrating. Look at that smirk, like,
and the ridiculous hairdo.
Oh,
and just,
I know.
I don't know. I don't know why poor Britney always ends up with these guys that look like they look like they're canvassers for Monster Energy back in the late 90s or something. They're all, or they look like little Fred Durst clones, like a specific type of California trashy guy that
Yes.
they wear the flat billed hat and they wear the wife beater and the saggy pants
And the hoodie.
yeah, and the hoodie and everything. And it's just like this specific type of guy that she always ends up with, except this latest one who's weird in his own way, but we'll get.
Yeah, we'll get to him. So she starts to have some kind of normalcy, and I feel so bad for her and her children because all she ever wanted was a family.
I know there's so many clips of her talking about how she just wants to be a mom and she wants to have kids and she feels like that's the coolest thing that you could ever do. And everybody who knows me, any of my watchers, fans out there, knows that that's like a big deal to me. I'm big on like restoring motherhood to being an honorable, cool, venerated thing to do with your life. Instead of everybody trashing motherhood as something you do if you're too lazy to have a career. Mm-hmm. And she really just wanted to do that. And even after the conservatorship stuff started, she had said she wanted to have more kids. She said she wanted to have 5, which is what I have. And it made me so sad because they forced her to get an IUD mm-hmm. and they wouldn't let her have it removed. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to have more kids. And that's like a really gross violation of human rights, in my opinion, to forcibly not like, it's like what they would do to people when they would give them lobotomies or something, you know, back in the day where it's like, oh, you can't have children. And her dad doesn't want her to because it would present legal problems for the conservatorship, number one. And number two, there's more people that her money has to go to.
Mm-hmm. So she's starting to have this family with Kevin. I feel like that was probably like the happiest time of her life. Her pregnancies and her 2 boys were born within like a year of each other.
Yeah.
And she was on TikTok this week because Mr. Federline released some secret footage of her yelling at the kids, thinking that this was going to be some kind of damning thing against Britney. But everyone is rallying around her, saying all she does is sound like a normal mom, saying, you need to respect me, and this is my house, and I'm going to be your mother. And, you know, like stern. She did say a couple cuss words, but this poor girl has been disrespected and abused her entire life. And now her kids, the one thing that she did everything for, are coming back and, you know, giving her hate and disrespect. So I'm like, yeah, Britney, you put those kids where they need to be. Like,
well, and that's what like we would consider normal parenting, like real parenting, right? Yeah. But in the new agey weirdness that we now live in, it's like you're supposed to treat the child like a little golden god who can never be upset and who can never cry, and you have to just give them everything they want. And if they fall down, you just rush over and you're like, oh my God, sweetie, are you okay? Like that's the approved parenting. Now, if you do actual parenting, which I always say, like I'm a Mary Poppins mom, where she used to say in the movie, she'd say, I'm kind but extremely firm. Mm-hmm. I think that that's ideal parenting to me, in my opinion, but you can't do that now. Yeah. Now children have to be treated like they're made of glass, and like if they think they're a boy when they're 2 and they're really a girl, you have to tell them that they're a boy, and you have to like, if your child thinks they're a dinosaur, you have to say, you're the best dinosaur, sweetie. You're the most beautiful dinosaur mommy's ever seen. And, you know, you see moms in public all the time. The kid will be like smacking the mom with something. And the mom will be like, Jaden, Braden, Hayden, Caden, Aiden, sweetie, please don't hit mommy. That hurts mommy when you hit mom. And I'm like, the heck is this crap?
Yeah. This is gentle parenting is what you're talking about.
It's not good for kids to teach them that they're in charge and let them abuse you. That's kind of a side tangent, but it's like, yeah, I think they thought if you put this out, people would be horrified, and normal people in the world look at it and go, yeah, these are teenage boys who are being disrespectful and rude. Yeah. And she's telling them, no, that won't be tolerated.
Yeah. She's like, if I want to give you lotion for your face, I'm going to give it to you and you're going to take it and put it on. Like, you go, Brittany. And I love how this backfired on Kevin and just made him look like the piece of TP he is. Okay, so this is another thing. They always painted her as a bad mother, even when the kids were babies, because they were always trying to get her. I remember one time she was carrying a coffee and her baby, and somebody tripped her, and the baby went this way and the coffee went that way, and
they were like, oh my gosh, she cares more about the coffee than the baby.
No, and if you
which is not what happened.
No, she's just trying to juggle all these things, and there's a million cameras going off in her face, and it's just like so not.
They would intentionally chase her and terrorize her and put her in a dangerous, scary situation.
Yes.
And then watch her try to fumble her way out of it with 2 infants and then be like, look what a terrible mother she is.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculous.
So she was telling the story about one time the baby fell out of his high chair when the nanny was watching it, not her. And they had to take the baby to the hospital. And she said the doctors were so rude and abusive towards her that they called CPS. And this is the beginning of the law getting enmeshed with her life. And so now she's in the CPS system, which is so hard to get out of. They will keep tabs on you forever. Mm-hmm. And, I've heard a lot of bad things about the CPS system and how it's connected with child TRAFF. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So these are not the best people to be bound to legally.
No, and it goes back to what we had mentioned in the last episode, which is that oftentimes when we're talking about this kind of thing, the people who are going to save you and help you are really the people that you have to look out for.
Yeah.
And it's one of the ways. So like when people are trying to figure out how conspiracy theories work or how control works or how these kind of things work, it's usually that that's where the term gaslighting like really kind of came from on the internet is they'll be doing something bad to you while at the same time telling you that they are saving you from that bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's like a form of inversion, which is like a satanic thing. So just as we're talking about this, that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind is a lot of times the people who are always saying, well, we're just helping, we're just saving her, we're looking out for her. And, like Kevin Federline has said that Britney's dad saved her life. He saved her life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, okay, dude. And it worked out really good for him, just totally coincidentally.
Well, she finances his whole family and his other families. So there's like upwards of 10 people in Kevin Federline's universe that she pays for everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If you guys look at the amount of money that is getting paid out of her estate through this conservatorship, it's insane. It's mind-boggling the amount of money that people are making off of it.
It's crazy. And they try to stop her from using her own money to hire lawyers so she can get her own money back.
Yeah.
What?
She was never even told by her court-appointed lawyer that she could file to have the conservatorship ended.
Right.
How a lawyer is supposed to work in your best interest on your behalf and advocate for you, and he never told her
because every time
file
she did, they would stick her in a mental hospital. So okay, let's get to the details of this.
Yeah.
So she's got the family. The paparazzi are ramping it up. They're terrorizing her so much. There are laws now because of her and Princess Diana.
Yep. Which is another one, you guys.
Mm-hmm. Kevin leaves her postpartum to go party in Vegas and cheat and do whatever he's going to do.
Yeah.
Right after she had the second baby, and things get heated, and now she is being smashed in the press, and he takes off. He bounces to go party in Vegas.
Just like danced out of there.
Yeah. So this is around 2007.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. And this is about the first time that she ends up in a little place called Promises.
Promises. You're except for before she went to Promises, in 2007 on Valentine's Day, she checks into this facility called the Crossroads Center in the Caribbean. Right? Yeah. And Crossroads is founded by Eric Clapton and Richard Conte, and he is the CEO of the Priory Hospitals Group of London. I don't know if that came up in any of your
I didn't get that one.
Okay. So Crossroads is interesting because it is a very esoteric concept. The crossroads, that's where you meet the gods. And if you ask Eric Clapton, he'll probably tell you I named it for Robert Johnson.
I was going to say, Clapton is a blues guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that kind of comes from.
And he would probably say because you're at the crossroads in your life where you have to pick addiction or, life or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
So crossroads is super important in voodoo. All voodoo ceremonies happen at the crossroads. Robert Johnson said he met the devil at the crossroads. During her breakdown era, she was seen wearing a skirt with the words "Evil Britney" and "Voodoo" written on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So then when she gets home from Crossroads, she dyes her hair dark brown.
Oh, yeah. This is right before the head shaving.
Yes. And this reminds me of a story. So you know who David Icke is?
Yeah, for sure.
And, he worked with that one lady, Arizona Wilder, who talks about all of this stuff, ritual abuse and stuff like that. And she said that when she was in that, they wanted all of their goddesses to be blonde for a reason. And when she got out of it, she also dyed her hair dark brown to signify that she was no longer part of this cult. So this is when she goes to Esther's hair salon in Sherman Oaks, and she takes the shears and she buzzes her head. Mm-hmm. And you can see she's got a Star of David necklace on backwards.
Yeah, backwards.
Right. So she's got that. Esther is a big in esoterica too, because it's one of the positions on the Eastern Star of Masonry. And it means star, and it's also Madonna's Kabbalistic name.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So after that whole shaving the head ordeal, this is when she goes to Promises Malibu, right? Yep. And they asked her why she did it, and she said she was tired of people touching her and she didn't want them plugging things into her.
Yes. And she has a haircut where all she does is shave your head, and it's called the Britney, which I thought was really gross.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to take this horrible moment in this girl's life.
Yeah. Whenever she touches, people will try to get a piece, and it's so true. Like, she sings "You Want a Piece of Me," and everybody.
Yeah. One of her forced tours that she said in the conservatorship that she was forced to do this tour against her will is called "Piece of Me." Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So when she goes to Promises in Malibu, which this place no longer exists. It went bankrupt in 2018, and it's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. But I went back and found some really interesting, weird things about Promises. So at the time that Britney was there, first of all, her dad, Jamie, also went there in 2004 for drinking. Mm-hmm. In 2007, Britney went there. And at that time, the director of the clinical operations was this doctor named Suzanne Poland. And it says in her bio and everything from there that she's a somatic experiencing practitioner that's based on Wilhelm Reich and Elsa Gindler. Oh, so I know you know who Wilhelm Reich is.
Yep.
Super creeper, very weird. Yes.
He locked his daughter in a cage.
Yeah.
Called his orgone generator.
Yeah. And he did tons of weird sexual stuff. He was constantly getting kicked out of even the creepy psych communities. If you look into the history of psychology and psychiatry, it's pretty awful. It's pretty terrible. But he was one of the worst ones. He was potentially a psychopath and very bizarre and had lots of weird ideas about sex and energy and all these other things. So this is based on his theories of trapped energy. Mm-hmm. And one of his students, Elsa Gindler, went to the Esalen Institute in 1962. And one of her students became a teacher at Esalen. And Esalen is very heavily connected to New Age movement, psychedelics, New World Order, global elite stuff. Like you guys have probably heard a little bit about Esalen Institute, but it's a very bizarre place out there in California. So they were using these types of techniques there, apparently, where it's like very new age, ritualistic. They do body work on people. And it's very contested whether this is even considered something that should be involved in psychology or psychiatry at all, but promises their clinical director is using this on people who go there, apparently. Dr. Ewan Cameron and Dr. Jolene West are both referenced in the Esalen Institute's Theory and Research Center, along with a bunch of other MK Ultra doctors. So if you go even to the Esalen Institute website now, they have like a library or a research area of their website where you can reference all of these studies from MK Ultra doctors who are using all kinds of different drugs, electroconvulsive therapy treatments, things like isolation and sleep deprivation to reprogram people and help them with trauma. Again, they're helping you with your trauma by traumatizing you further, by sleep depriving you and isolating you and restraining you and putting you on all kinds of weird drugs and Lord knows what else. So
making you get rid of your orgone energy.
Yeah.
However they're doing that.
Doing probably some weird, well, he had like all kinds of weird orgasm therapy that he would do, Wilhelm Reich. So this is the kind of stuff they're doing at this very popular Malibu rehab center that costs like $10,000 a day or something ridiculous. It's like the average stay there's like $60,000 or something. Lindsay Lohan also went there in 2007. Charlie Sheen was there twice. Winona Ryder went there, which she is now in Stranger Things, which is completely about MK Ultra.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow. And ABC News said that this was like a write-up they did in the early or like mid 2000s, since so many celebrities were going there all the time. They said that it was not a luxury place to go, even though it cost so much, and that it was more of a boot camp style facility with dorms, shared bathrooms, 6:45 a.m. wake up times, and like a very regimented type of place to go. Other stars like Charlie Sheen and Danny Bonaducci said that it was a total joke and that they didn't really do any therapy there. So that all kind of together leads me to think that it could possibly be a front. The way that they did MK Ultra experiments was the CIA would set up a front organization, whether it was a school, whether it was a foundation, whether it was a research fund. They had entirely fake hospitals. They would raise funds and build totally phony baloney hospitals where they would tell people they're treating them for this or that, but really they're using them for experimentation. This seems a lot like that to me, just because of the fact that like the guy who founded it, you can't find anything on him now. Can't find him anywhere on the internet. This woman who was the clinical director, like she says she had a doctorate in psychology, that she's this double licensed therapist, and she did all of this stuff. She was the Promises director from at least 2003 to 2008. Also cannot find her anywhere. So she's either retired and dropped off the face of the earth, but she's not on social media. She's not on LinkedIn. There's nothing on Wikipedia. There's nothing when you Google her at all, except for like 2 or 3 references to this. I had to go to like the Wayback Machine archives to the Promises website from this time to even find her.
Oh, wow.
So you can't find these people now. They're ghosts. They've disappeared. They've closed the facility. So all of these things together make it feel a bit like it could be a front.
Yeah, that's super sus. That and all of the celebrities that have been in and out there.
Yeah.
And what their lives turned out to be like and where they came from.
So we're going to go into a little bit later. As we said, this is not just Britney. There's other people they're doing this with. Lindsay Lohan, they sent her there in 2007. And then right after that, tried to commit her to the same UCLA Resnick psych ward that they committed Britney to. And as soon, so this is the same year, they're doing this to her and to Britney in the same year. And there was this mysterious business manager named Lou Taylor who
Yes. Oh,
was instrumental in getting Britney's conservatorship going. She
yeah.
also tried to do it with Lindsay Lohan. But Lindsay Lohan's dad stopped it. The mom was going to go for it completely. The mom was going to do the conservatorship, put Lou Taylor in charge of it, make her manager, and the dad stopped it. But it's like they have a process because they're doing the same thing with the same young, like Disney pop stars, right? Put them in Disney or on Nickelodeon, get them a record deal, say that they have addiction problems, put them in this facility, put them in a psych ward under a California law called 5150, where they can put you in these psych wards against your will, keep you there until a doctor says that you're safe to be released, at which point you're already in a conservatorship and there's nothing you can do about it. Same thing was done with Amanda Bynes just a few years later. They put her in the same places. Okay, so yeah, Lindsay Lohan was sent to UCLA Resnick in 2010, and then that's when they tried to get the conservatorship. Amanda Bynes was put in UCLA Resnick in 2013 and did get put in a conservatorship, which she is now trying to get out of. Same thing. So they do the same thing where they'll get these girls to what I think is happening really is they're putting them on drugs, which make them do crazy things. And they go, look, she's crazy. We have to commit her. And then they get them into conservatorships and they have total and complete control. And then anytime they do anything that's not approved, we put you back in the facility and we reprogram you and we get you to fall in line.
Yeah. So these are the mind control slaves that are trying to break their programming. Their brains are trying to put the pieces back together, because this happens when you're an adult. They report that around 25, 30, like if you have been through this as a child, this is when the pieces start to fall into place, because it's your body's attempt to heal itself. And you have all these memories and you're putting the pieces together. And that's when they get their meat hooks into you and declare you mentally unfit. So when she's at Promises, she starts terrifying the staff by scrawling 666 on her head and screaming, I'm a fake, and saying she's the Antichrist. And later that night, she attempted to unalive herself by attaching a sheet to a light fixture, but the paramedics were called, and luckily she was unhurt. So this is the incident. Oh, I forgot. She went from the hair salon to a tattoo parlor.
Yes, and she still had the backwards star on.
And she gets some lips on her wrist.
Yes.
And a cross on her hip.
Yep.
Because now she thinks in her mind, she thinks she's free because she shaved her head. She's got rid of her blonde hair. She's like, now they won't want anything to do with me because I'm ugly.
Yeah.
But they're not done with her yet. So if you can see the look in her eye when she's shaving, like she looks like she's got one over on them.
Yeah.
She doesn't look like a crazy person. She looks like a person who knows exactly what she's doing, and she's like rebelling against everything, and she has a plan. But they're not going to let her get away with it.
No.
So this is when the press declares her insane, a drug addict, unfit mother, and they keep using this word, train wreck.
Yeah.
Britney's a train wreck. She's a train wreck. And if you know anything about Monarch programming, one of their the insiders' ways to describe this is the freedom train, they call it. Just another like way to gaslight people, because they're not free. But it does work like a train, because people who were abused in it end up becoming handlers. So there's links like boxcars.
Yeah.
Right? And so when the programmed person is trying to self-destruct, it's called being thrown from the freedom train, they call it. And like we said last week in interviews, she's switching alter personalities. She talks about being completely alone, and she calls her life Groundhog Day.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
And says, I'm sad. 2012, she was being sued by a guy named Sam Lufty, and you just mentioned him.
Lindsay, but Lindsay was connected with Lou Taylor. So Sam Lutfi and Lou Taylor's a woman. She owns like a management company. And she like will weasel her way into different stars' lives.
Okay.
And like kind of one of those people that will help create a problem and then be the only person that can solve it. Sam is the same. When Britney was really isolated after the conservatorship started, he suddenly like appeared in her life and would be like hanging out with her and positioned himself as her only friend, her best friend, her only friend. There was like this short period of time where she was like thinking he was the one who was going to help her out of this.
And he's the guy with the little like
he's got the little
thing.
What do they call that?
I don't know. It's just the line.
Like a little Fu Manchu thing. And it did not turn out that he was helpful. And he is the one that when Amanda Bynes was in all kinds of trouble, he flew her. She was in Europe, I think, and he flew her from there to LA and had the police and paramedics there ready to take her into custody as soon as she got off the plane to have her committed and have her put in the conservatorship. Lou Taylor was the one that Britney said in emails had been stalking her.
I wrote that down.
She was afraid that this person might hurt her mother, that she was obsessed with her, that she was crazy and trying to like get into her house, get into her life. And she was like emailing her lawyers saying, I've got a serious problem. This person is stalking me. It's very scary.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about my dad, but I think that this lady could find my mom and I'm really worried about it. And this is the person who kind of talked Jamie Spears into this conservatorship thing, allegedly.
Yes.
That's
so
what they say.
In 2007, you're right. She writes a letter to her lawyer, Gary Stiffelman, about a crazy stalker she had named Lou Taylor, who kept saying, Britney is possessed and she needs to come and kill the spirits.
Yeah. At the same time, has this super shady business talent management company.
Well,
and is involved in getting all these stars into conservatorships.
Lou Taylor, she's her business manager. TriStar Entertainment is her company.
Yes.
And this group is accused of helping Britney's dad mirror her iCloud to spy on Britney. Right?
Yeah.
And so Lou Taylor also visited Lindsay Lohan and was part of her conservatorship. That was where I was confused.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I think, that's true. She did.
And so Lou Taylor is connected to this thing called Mercy Ministries. And when Britney's conservatorship happened, her charity that she had, the Britney Spears Foundation, was broken up and donated to two charities. One was Mercy Ministries, Lou Taylor's husband's church. So Lou Taylor has a husband who's a Calvary Chapel preacher.
Yep.
Called Mercy Multiplied Ministries in Nashville. And when you go to their website, they say they serve young women with eating disorders, drug and alcohol addiction, depression, unplanned pregnancy, physical and sexual abuse, and TRAFF. And they deal with areas of demonic oppression, demonic activity, and exorcisms. So this is getting so bizarre. Lou Taylor, who is this person? And it's like all of these goblins are always surrounding Britney. And when she takes pictures with people, it's so crazy because she looks like an bright angel, like a beautiful blonde, angelic woman. And all of these people just look so gross, like her dad, Lou Taylor. And if you see her and her like squad, it's disgusting.
It's true. Like,
let's see. So, the day after she did the shaving the head thing, she tried to go party at the Roxy and was admitted to Sinai Medical Center and then went to Promises. She gets out, she tries to go see Kevin in San Fernando. And this is when she attacked the paparazzi with the umbrella.
Yes.
They were on a road trip. They were somewhere out, stopped for gas and driving. She's like, I just want to go see my kids and my husband. I'm trying to get to them and they won't leave her alone. So she attacks the thing with the umbrella. So all of this behavior is what makes it look like it's okay to commit her and to take away her rights and everything.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
I
now,
feel like they push these people and
yes.
put them in situations on purpose, which again, gaslighting, if you guys do have people in your life that are like narcissistic or bad people or like borderline personality types or something like that, that's exactly what they'll do. They'll push you to the point that you freak out and then they go, see, you're crazy. You're crazy. It's
Yeah.
you.
And then they'll play calm
Yeah. And
because they
they'll just
know
be like, I'm really praying for you and you just need help. And
it is
we
so
just really
true.
want to help you.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
they'll push you, they know the buttons that will make you angry and
Yeah.
they'll do it in a calm way. And like, you're so right. When you explode, and then they go back, see, she's crazy.
Yeah. They're
So
like, oh,
they also, oh, she ran over someone's toe when she was
yeah.
trying to get away. So this was another um, reason for them to take control of her. She tries to make this new album called Blackout.
Yeah. Which everybody feels like is her best stuff in a way. Like it's her, I think it's one of the only albums that is remotely her. Didn't she produce it?
Mhm.
I think. Yeah.
And so this goes together with the trauma-based mind control too, because when you're switching personalities, the other one is blackout, right? Missing time.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. In 2008, she locks herself in the house with one of her sons, and the police came and took her away in an ambulance. Do you remember that?
Yes. And this is another situation where they set her up because she had like a nanny or somebody like that in the house with her.
Mm-hmm.
And the nanny person, this is what Britney says in these documents for the conservatorship, where she's explaining what happened to her. She says, no, the person who was there, like this nanny or assistant or whoever it was telling her that something, they knew this was going to happen. They were going to do this. So they had like fire department and police come, and Britney didn't know what was going on. And the assistant, babysitter, nanny person was like, oh, take the baby and go in the bathroom and lock yourself in there until I find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, okay. So she went in there and did that. And she says that there was somebody telling her that there was something dangerous going on outside and to lock herself in the bathroom with the baby for safety reasons while she found out what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Brittany's like, I wasn't trying to not return the baby. They were telling me something was going on and that I had to do that for safety reasons. And since she had paparazzi and crazy people break into her yard and different things like that in the past, makes total sense that she would be like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
and go
she
hide.
was totally set up for that.
Yeah.
So they take her away in the stretcher, and then guess who goes to visit her in the hospital?
Dr. Phil?
Dr. Phil. What
Dr.
is
Phil.
he doing? Dr. Phil, who's connected to Oprah.
Yes. And lots of other shady, creepy stuff.
Yeah.
Like he was sending kids to these camps, like the one where they sent Paris Hilton to, where she said she was subjected to horrific abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And Paris Hilton, named Dr. Phil as one of these people. And when she did that, you guys remember the Cash Me Outside girl?
Yeah.
Bad Baby?
Yeah.
She
She's
came
the
out.
OnlyFans millionaire now.
Yeah, I know. That's very unfortunate, but she came out after Paris did and said that when Dr. Phil sent her to one of those get these wayward teenagers straight camps, that she was abused as well. She said that they would, and they all say the same thing, which is they lock them in isolation and they won't let them sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And in MK Ultra experiments, some of the best documentation we have of what they were doing is from Dr. Louis Jolyon West, aka Jolly. And in court testimony he gave, in his journals, in his documents, he repeatedly said that what worked better than drugs or hypnosis or anything was isolation and sleep deprivation. That you could take a perfectly sane person, and if you isolate them and deprive them of sleep, you can do almost anything to their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these young girls and young stars that they send to these scare them straight type of camps to like reform them come out saying they put me in isolation. They wouldn't let me sleep. They would withhold food, things like that. And then there's like sexual abuse allegations as well. But I just find it I don't think that's something that if all these girls were just like narcissistic um, bad girls, right? That they would all say they put me in isolation. That
Yeah.
just doesn't seem like something I could see them making like inappropriate claims or things like that, but to say that they were all isolated and sleep deprived is very bizarre to me.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something that once she said that, there were other people who have come out and said, yes, the camps that Dr. Phil was sending us all to would put us in isolation for like days and days and days and withhold sleep and food
Mm-hmm.
to get us to comply.
Wasn't there a study done? They tried to do a study on sleep deprivation, but they had to quit because they figured out it was like one of the most horrible tortures you could do to somebody.
Yeah, and you can kill people. You can really push people to like the edge where they're desperate to do anything if you sleep deprive them enough.
Hmm. So now Brittany is in the hospital. She's in UCLA. Dr. Phil goes to see her to convince her to stay in the treatment, but um, the family gets pissed off at him because he says he wants to do a show with Brittany.
Yeah.
Now Dr. Phil's
Apparently he
out.
wasn't authorized to say that.
Yeah, my light just went out. Oh well. Um, she was kept in the hospital during her first conservatorship hearing. So they waived all her rights.
Yep.
They kicked out her lawyer that she hired,
Yeah,
saying
because
she was incompetent to even hire a lawyer.
yeah,
So all of her constitutional rights and all the due process is just thrown out the window.
yep,
And this is something we're going to see more of with people like AJ,
yep,
AJ Jones.
yes. Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this reminded me of that movie. I don't know you've seen this. It's called I Care a Lot. Have you seen
No.
that?
Uh-huh.
So it is about how they use the court system to abuse elderly people. Like if somebody has a lot of assets and they are single and they're elderly, they will have like a court appointed carer come to their house and assess them,
Yeah.
declare them mentally unfit to take care of themselves, and liquidate all of their assets.
Yeah.
And the court is all in on it. The judge is in on it. The lawyers are in on it. So if you haven't seen that movie, you should really go watch that because it's like a behind the scenes look at how they just rob people through the court system.
Yeah. And I wonder about this judge. Um, just because there was things that went on how they did this with her still in the hospital. It was like they already knew what the verdict was going to be. It was
Yeah.
like they had already planned it out.
Yeah.
So it's very, very suspicious.
So then they use her kids as leverage and they tell her if you do everything we say, then we won't take your kids away. And if you keep working, um, they're just two little carrots on a stick, and that's all she wants. You could tell she just wants to be with her kids.
Yeah.
Um, but they're splitting up the custody. They're taking away all her rights. Now she only has visitation with them, like
court
supervised visitation.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. She gets to work now with Dr. Luke, who worked with Kesha and Katy Perry.
Oh my gosh,
And
that
then,
guy.
yeah.
The
And
guy
then,
that Kesha says absolutely like assaulted her.
yeah.
Yeah.
She gets to work with Jonas Ackerland, and we'll talk about the videos themselves in a little bit. Let's see. Oh, and then in 2012, I'm trying to go chronologically. These disturbing stories and testimonies began surfacing about what her life is like.
Yeah.
And there was this nanny named Lourdes Torres. She testified that she had been emotionally manipulated throughout her court-mandated conservatorship, and she claims she quit her job because she was so disturbed by what she saw happening to Britney. And some of the allegations includes Mr. Lufty drugging Britney, yelling at her, cutting off her phone line, removing her cell phone chargers, and saying they control everything she does, from her business managers to her security guards. So
yeah,
Then she does the Circus Tour. Do you remember that album, Circus?
Yes.
Just like a circus.
Again, and this is another thing. She's always in cages.
Yes.
In circus, but throughout her career, performances, videos, she's always in cages.
By her own request, too.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like it's way too much to be coincidental.
Yeah.
Like nobody has that big of a fetish for cage imagery, I don't think. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when she's supposed to be so incompetent, oh, and they say things like she has dementia.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But she's going on the circus tour. She's going on Glee. She's
Yes.
got a clothing line for Kohl's.
How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
She was on that show. Yeah. She's completely incompetent to run her own life, but totally competent to work like a back-breaking work schedule.
To do a world tour.
Do world tours, major TV shows, live performances all the time. Like even through the holidays.
Radio appearances, guest like interviews, all of this. And then she does the I Am Femme Fatale era.
Yeah.
And what is a femme fatale? It's like a seductive woman who like lures men into dangerous or compromising situations.
Yes.
Like a spy.
Yeah. Yes. Like a honeypot.
Exactly. Espionage, which is in so many of her videos.
So many.
When she was talking about the video that she filmed for the Femme Fatale, she said it was filmed in an underground meat plant.
Ooh.
She says it was so grimy and gross and smelled like poop and sweat. It was disgusting.
We should also mention, as we're talking about the Femme Fatale thing, she briefly dated a model named Isaac Cohen around 2008-ish, 2000. It was like right after the breakup with K-Fed. And he, if you look him up, he's a model, but he's also a photographer, and he's connected with all these other modeling agency people, one of whom is Rachel Chandler. If you guys remember Rachel Chandler, before she basically got scrubbed from the internet, she was one of Epstein Jeffries' procurers and handlers. And people have said like that her last name Chandler isn't her real last name. It's like C handler for child handler.
Yeah.
And there's multiple pictures of her all over that you can still find with all kinds of famous people, including like Bill Clinton and Madonna and Prince Andrew and all these people. There's also, and I was trying to like find something to really like validate that it's real, but sometimes that's hard to do with photos. There is a photo from this era of Britney with Isaac Cohen and with Rachel Chandler together, and it's allegedly at one of these parties.
Oh wow.
So there's that like that modeling agencies are a notorious front for child TRAFF. You know, and so this guy magically appears, you know, dates her for a minute. Oh, and he's one of the ones that said a bunch of horrible things about her being like wild in bed and being like a nympho, and that's all she ever wanted to do, and that's the only time she was happy is when she was doing that, and afterwards she would revert to like a childlike state and things. So
well, could it be one of her alters?
Well, I mean,
beta alters.
Yeah, that's a big part of Monarch programming, is to make them sex kittens on the one hand, who are like have voracious sexual appetites, but who also act like innocent children. And that's the thing they do with a ton of pop stars, bring them out as innocent girls, like innocent young girls, and then turn them into these sexy vixens. And it's, you see that with like Miley, you see that with Katy Perry, you see it with Christina, you see it with all these girls. They do the Selena Gomez, they do it with all of them, where it's like, hi, I'm cute young girl and I'm so innocent and adorable, and then it's like, ooh, I'm exploring my sexuality, and then it's like, now I'm a vixen. And then it like even goes into, like you were saying last episode, BDSM territory, where it's like, I want you to smack me, I want you to hit me, I want you to choke me type of stuff. And there's tons of songs out in the last few years by female artists with this theme. And I noticed that before I had even like put it together with this, but like, because I would always be telling my kids, I'm like, don't listen to this stuff. It's like, that's not normal. It's not a normal thing for a girl to want to get beaten and physically
No.
abused in an intimate relationship. That's not normal. I don't know why this is trendy and cool now, but you see it especially with like all the female rappers. They're all singing and rapping about wanting to get choked and hit and beat and everything. And it's like,
Well, her and Rihanna did that song, S&M,
yeah,
and her looks sometimes with like leather biker hat and the studded look.
yes.
I mean, straight out of YMCA era, you know, homosexual fashion stuff.
Yeah. And if you guys know anything about the San Francisco gay activism scene in the 60s and 70s, they had BDSM leather clubs that would actually have lobbying groups that would lobby Congress for like homosexual rights and
Oh, really?
man boy love rights. Oh yeah. I'm working on a piece on that. Of course, always connected to like very famous, powerful, high level people.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you look into it.
So they've got her in the meat market and smells like poop and sweat. I actually watched the Femme Fatale live performance,
Okay, I've never seen that one.
and it starts out she's escaping from a high security prison.
Huh.
So there she is behind bars again. She's looking glamorous, by the way. She's in like a sparkly unitard when the guy's pursuing her. She breaks out of the prison. Um, she comes out on a weird throne made of like metal screen doors. She is dancing in cages. So this performance is so overtly sexual, and so is a lot of them, that it kind of almost gets boring.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like,
how
yeah,
many
we get
times
it.
can you see a crotch and a booty and a pole dance? And it's just kind of like, it's not even
Yeah.
scandalous or titillating anymore. It's just like you're just doing your job. It's just like, shake your butt
Yeah.
in someone's face.
Yeah.
So
That's so true.
so the spies throughout this the storyline of the concert, there's a guy who's like hunting Britney now that she's escaped the facility. He's just like a greasy guy in a bunker with all these TVs surveilling her and like trying to catch her or whatever. And there is a montage of all the guys she's killed in her videos.
What?
Yeah. So like Toxic and
Yeah.
a couple others, where she's the assassin. So they show the clips of those. Will I Am is in this.
Isn't that where It's Britney Bitch came from when she
Probably.
did her collabs with him?
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it
I
is.
don't know. I'm not a big Black Eyed Peas fan. I'm not a Will
I'm
I
not
Am fan. I
either.
think they're
I'm not
kind of
either.
hacky, but
I do too.
yeah. She picks an audience member and gives him a lap dance. And then she sings that song, If You Seek Amy.
Yeah.
That.
I remember that. And I remember a lot of people not putting together what that meant. It's an acronym if you haven't figured it out.
He says, all the boys and all the girls are dying to If You Seek Amy.
Uh-huh.
So just think about that. Say it 3 times fast.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And she's singing this as Marilyn Monroe. And we talked about that last time because Marilyn Monroe was one of the first presidential model mind control slaves. So
she was my introduction to this stuff when I was in junior high. Yeah, I grew up mostly with my grandmas and watched a lot of old Hollywood movies, and I was super fascinated with all the old Hollywood starlets. And when my mom would take us to the library and let us pick books, I would always pick books about them. And I got a bunch of books about her, not having any idea about, like, because I was in 6th grade. I vividly remember this. And reading about her suspicious death, how the autopsy was weird and botched, and her connections with the president and all the different theories. An 11-year-old me really thought I was just going to go back to the library and get more books and like solve this case and figure out what happened. But yeah, it was like my first introduction to the idea that like maybe a lot of this stuff isn't all what it seems, because you have like the Elton John song Candle in the Wind, and you have these tributes to her, and she still makes so much money.
Mm-hmm.
Marilyn Monroe's estate, it's a lot like Elvis, where it just churns out eternal money.
Yeah.
And
And Britney will be too.
yeah. And it's like the last interview that Marilyn did before she died, she was talking about how she finally felt like she had so many parallels with Britney about like feeling controlled, not being able to really do what she wanted, not being able to be with who she wanted, not being able to have a family. And she was like finally thinking she was getting to a point in her life where she could do what she wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
then she commits suicide, right? Or accidentally overdoses.
I was gonna start out the show asking if her life is in danger now. And
I definitely think it is.
yeah.
Because if this, right now, they can kind of milk it as like a way to keep her stuff selling and keep her in the limelight. But
Mm-hmm.
if it ever, I feel like if it ever gets to a point where she's worth more um, unalive,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, like why wouldn't they? It's happened with so many people, I think.
So Marilyn Monroe was in Playboy, and I
Mhm.
found this recently. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No.
Monarch
Wow.
guy in Playboy. Isn't that
That's
crazy?
crazy. Yes. And we know that Playboy has tons of connections to the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
Gloria
And,
Steinem comes to mind.
and so does the paparazzi
Yeah.
and the tabloids.
Yes.
Jay, I, he said something a long time ago about he had a solid connection with the tabloids and the CIA, and I was like, I couldn't find it anywhere, but I know it's there, so maybe I'll find it one day. But I know that like tabloids and paparazzi and
It
CIA
would
go
be
together.
it would be just the ideal place to put someone.
Yeah.
And Brittany would always say, like, for one thing, she didn't want to go to promises. Like, she specifically said she didn't want to go there because she knew they'd find her there. She said, they will find me there. They'll know I'm there. Like, I don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go somewhere else? And they were like, no, you have to go here.
Yeah.
And she would say that she knew that they would always know where she was. And it's not, I mean, I know they get a lot of money for getting a picture of her and things like that back then, but they
Well,
would just always know where she was.
her dad would call him all the time and tell him, like,
Oh, nice.
yeah, because that was one of the ways to keep tabs on her. You know, if she got away from the group controlling her, they'd just call up the paparazzi and tell them, and they find her. And
Oh,
so this Femme Fatale concert, she has the spirit of all the Femme Fatales in history, they said. And then suddenly pyramids rise out of the sand. I don't know where the Egyptian imagery comes into this, but now she is an Egyptian queen. And I do have a pic of that.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's Femme Fatale. And then she is shown in like a seedy motel with multiple passports and aliases and identities, right? And then she comes out in her studded biker look, singing "Hit Me, Baby." She sings S&M. She becomes a master spy and breaks into the antagonist's lair and gets the jump on him. So he's been stalking her this whole time, and she turned it around. I think this is part of her imagination, like she's going to get them someday, right?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
all of her intelligence training.
Yeah.
And then it's time to fight some ninjas. Relatable. I don't know. And then
Were they just trying to get every cliche thing into like one set?
I don't know where the ninjas came from, but
And then she'll be Cleopatra, and then there will be ninjas.
Yeah.
And
okay, and then Nicki Minaj comes out and sings with her, and somehow Britney is taken to the underworld, and the song is about dancing until the world ends. Have you heard that?
yeah, yep.
And she emerges from the underground with angel wings.
Okay.
So that's the end of that weird concert peek into Britney's psyche, if you will.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So that was 2012?
This
Or was that later?
How was 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and then do you remember all her fragrances? Like,
yes.
She is worth so much money because of these fragrances are so popular.
Yeah, she has a ton of them, and they're owned by Elizabeth Arden's company, which I have a history in the beauty industry, and so I
Mm-hmm.
know a little bit about the history of these companies and who owns them and how they do things. And that stuff can get a little bit dark and weird too. But when I see them putting out like 14 fragrances with her name on it, and she doesn't own any of it, I mean, she gets some money, but it's not much.
Mm-hmm.
These companies like make a ton of money off of just putting her name on it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all like fantasy and fantasy this and fantasy that. And
I used to wear Curious when I was
oh, really?
like 21, 22. I'd wear that, and my brother was like, "You smell like a baby hooker." I'm like, like
Wow,
I'm
how
like, that's
appropriate.
probably spot on though, like what they were trying
Yeah,
to like create, right?
yeah, probably.
Um,
Baby hooker.
so this is 2012, 2011. She goes on X Factor as a judge, but she is still declared mentally unfit to testify on her own behalf. So she can't even go and give a testimony, but she can go be a judge on X Factor,
Makes no sense at all.
right?
It's absurd. And they do it right in front of the whole world, and nobody does anything about it.
Yeah. So did you ever see that episode of South Park called Britney's New Look?
Yes, I
That is
did.
so dark. Do you want to talk
It
about that?
is. Well, yeah, it is. And like Andy watched the last one we did, and he was like, wow, that South Park episode was like way more real life than you would think. But he's like, they kind of nailed it. Like they
Mm-hmm.
kind of, he's like, and he said, sometimes I think they know a lot more than you would think they do.
I think they do too.
Because they do get a lot of this stuff right, like way ahead of time.
Well, you've seen that one with I think it was like the Jonas Brothers, where Mickey
Yep.
Mouse was
Where
abusing
Mickey
her.
Mouse was evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Andy loves to do that Mickey Mouse impression. It's his
Yeah.
favorite. But no, that was super bizarre and very spot on. It was like very, like they show people absolutely, treating her exactly the way that we've just been describing this whole show.
Mm-hmm.
And telling people that she's not okay, and telling people that something's wrong, and people just keep pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. And even like the kids, even Cartman is just like, yeah, whatever, we're just going to sneak in there and get a picture or whatever. Like some of the kids want to help. I think it's been a long time since I watched this. Like a couple of the kids want to help, but Eric's just like, what, because he's a jerk. He's like the asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And she like blows her head off in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, she's still alive, and we'll just keep putting her out there. We'll just put sexy stuff on her and keep putting her out there. And people still, and the public, that's the thing. I think the main message is like the public doesn't even care that half of her head is missing.
Yeah.
They still just want to make her dance and make her entertain them. And they still just want to and they do talk in that episode about how we love to build up celebrities to destroy them.
Yeah, and it's really poignant too, because I remember that one performance at the VMAs where they were like, "Oh, she's fat and she's out of it," and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't even that heavy.
She wasn't,
but she wasn't as lithe as maybe like her teenage years. But like, why do you have to put her in a bikini?
Yeah, well, I remember watching that and saying, why did they put her in that outfit? Like who? And like, because I did hair, it wasn't that long after the head shaving. So her natural hair was maybe like that long or something. And they were trying to put extensions in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why wouldn't you just do a really high-end wig? Why would you do extensions that are like obvious and you can see like the beaded extensions?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just looking at it like, even as a stylist, going, who did this to her? Like who put her in this outfit? She can barely freaking walk down the stairs, and they're just like, go out there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Did they think it was going to go well? It's hard to believe that they thought it was going to go well.
I think you mentioned she was on lithium at that time.
Yes. So this is when Dr. Timothy Benson enters the scene and switches her from whatever medications they had her on before, which she said she didn't like them, but she could at least handle them. He took her off everything immediately and put her on like a high dose of lithium. Lithium is a drug. I mean, everybody knows the Nirvana song, right? And we all know what happened to Kurt Cobain and the weird stuff going on there. And Courtney Love had some kind of connection to this too that I can't remember now, but she kept coming up in the research and I was like, dang, she's kind of in everything too.
Oh, you
But
mean Courtney Love?
yeah, Courtney
Oh,
Love. Is that what I said?
you
Did
said
I say
Britney.
something? Oh, whoops, sorry. But they put her on lithium and she said that she felt totally out of it and like she was drunk all the time on this. And I had said in the previous episode, I had found a lot of documents where they were using lithium to suppress alters in people who they had induced DID or MPD in. So that kind of makes sense. And the thing about Dr. Benson, we talked a little bit last time about how he was a bit of a cornball and had all this he had like a self-help empire with all these books and like he contributed to some really shady foundation that looked super scammy to me that also doesn't exist anymore. And the person who ran that, you can't find him anymore. His Twitter's been abandoned right about the time that Dr. Benson died. So Dr. Timothy Benson had been her psychiatrist for years when he passed away, right when the conservatorship started. And the reason it's so suspicious, and if you just Google Dr. Timothy Benson, all you'll find is article after article about how weird it is that he just dropped dead right before he was supposed to go to court because they were investigating him specifically because they were worried about the medications that he had her on. And they were investigating that to find out if what he was doing was like protocol or if it was weird.
This is the guy that when he died, Britney said she dropped down on her knees and thanked God that he died.
Right? Yes, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
So this guy came in at some point during this conservatorship stuff to help her. I've heard that Jamie Spears, the dad, is the one who found him and hired him. And the reason that he ties Britney into the larger MKUltra conspiracy stuff is he was the director of both Fernside and the residents at Brooke McLean Hospital. So McLean Hospital is one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals in the country. They have several campuses. The main hospital is at Belmont, Massachusetts, and he was a director for 2 of their facilities, and he was also a clinical instructor at Harvard Medical School for 10 years. And McLean is notorious for being connected to MKUltra. It's one of the hospitals that comes up time and time again if you're reading anything about those programs. He died right before the conservators hearing as he was being investigated for the drugs he was prescribing her. At first, they did not say what a cause of death was for him, and then later they just said it was an aneurysm. But he was only 48 years old, didn't have any health problems that anyone knows of. He had 2 little kids, and all of a sudden, all his stuff is wiped from the internet. Like I said, he had all these books. The only one you can go and find on Amazon right now is the one that he did with like a group of other doctors right before he died, like weeks before he died. The rest of it's all scrubbed. His website is gone. It's hard to find any mention of him at Harvard now. It's like a lot of these people that are connected with this just seem to disappear from the internet, which is not normal, you guys. Like, you can Google people and find them forever and find everything they've ever done, as you know. So it's very weird, like, that they would just take all of his stuff down. But more to the point, he was a director of 2 of these notorious residents, like inpatient facilities. And McLean has a ton of connections. I'm going to try to like give you guys an overview of them and make them make some sense for why they connect to this. So one of the doctors who was made famous, who comes out of McLean Hospital, is Dr. Marsha Linehan. She created something called dialectical behavior therapy, which is now being heavily pushed by Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez went to this facility a few years ago. She says she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder there, and that they used this dialectical behavior therapy and that it was the most helpful thing ever. And so McLean gave her an award. They gave her the McLean Award, and she went to like this ceremonial dinner where she gave a speech about how helpful it was and how great McLean is and how much she recommends this dialectical behavior therapy. In that speech, she thanked David O. Russell for introducing her to the wonderful people at McLean. If you go look up who David O. Russell is, he is a producer who's done a bunch of popular movies and TV shows, some that Selena has been in. And he was accused in 2011 of sexually assaulting his transgender niece, which back in 2011, that's like 11 years ago, there was not a lot of people who had fully transitioned as teenagers at that point.
Yeah.
But this guy had a niece who had, and he did not deny it. That's the thing, is like, this went to court and he said, well, yeah, I did it, but she wanted me to. And I was curious about like the bodily changes. And I wanted to see. So I started feeling around, but I thought that she wanted, and this person was underage at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it did end up getting dropped, as these things often do. Like, you just pay off the person and then they drop the charges. So but Selena Gomez thanked this guy publicly for introducing her to the people at McLean Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Marshall Linehan, who came up with this therapy that Selena recommends, was committed to the Institute for Living as a child in 1961. She was like 16 or 17. So this doctor, you guys, it blows my mind. They committed her as a teenager because she now self-diagnoses herself as having had borderline personality disorder as a teenager, and said she was one of the most disturbed people that was committed to the Institute for Living. It's a mental hospital that's in Hartford, Connecticut. She was committed there for 26 months, so just over 2 years, and subjected to electroconvulsive therapy, Thorazine, Librium, and other very powerful drugs, as well as isolation and sleep deprivation in the 60s, which was at the height
electroshock is another staple of the MK Ultra.
Yes. And this was 1961 to 63 that she was there, which was considered like the height of this experimentation. When she got out, she said she never again had to be on any sort of drugs for her mental illness. So if she was truly one of the most disturbed and suicidal people who was admitted there, it would be very rare for her to never need any medication again. So after she gets out of the mental hospital, she attends Loyola University and earns a PhD there in psychology. It took her a while. She was there from like 1965 to 1971. While she was there, the Catholic priests from the Boston area who would later be involved in all of the high profile sex scandals and abuse scandals were being sent to Loyola. So what they would do in New York and Boston and Philadelphia, when they would find out that these priests were doing something abusive.
Well, Loyola is a Jesuit place, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So they would send them there for some reason to protect them from prosecution. And it was like known by the people at Loyola that this was going on. And this lady happened to be there attending school and going through the PhD program at the same time, and says she was a Catholic. So she became the student of a Catholic Jesuit priest who taught her Zen meditation. This particular priest was named Willis Yeager, and he was a student of Hugo Lassalle, who was one of the Jesuit priests who was at Hiroshima when the atom bomb went off. Whoa. And he miraculously survived Hiroshima.
Oh, dude.
And built, yeah, whoa, dude, is right. He built the, what's the name of it? Oh, the World Peace Memorial Cathedral, which is like this big UN globalist Jesuit project where they built this really bizarre modern art world peace cathedral at the site of the Hiroshima bombing. But so this lady happened to be going there. So they had put her in this hospital that sounds totally MK Ultra. She goes to college at Loyola, gets in with the Jesuit priests, starts studying Zen Buddhism practices under them, and develops this dialectical behavior therapy that she uses at McLean. Also, the Institute for Living, where Dr. Linehan had been placed for 26 months as a teenager, is also the institution that they sent all the Catholic priests to in order to avoid prosecution. They would send them there for treatment and so that they wouldn't get arrested and prosecuted. So keep this in mind because it's all going to come back together later.
Okay.
So McLean Hospital runs Bridgewater State hospital in Massachusetts, which has long been suspected of doing mind control experimentation. There's been multiple lawsuits from the 70s up through the 2000s, as recently as 2014, of patients who were there who were either killed or disabled or otherwise like horrifically injured by whatever was going on there. They even did a 1967 documentary. So again, MK Ultra starts around 1951 to 53, and even the government says it went up through 73. I'm 99% sure they continued it after that and just renamed it. But in 1967, they did a documentary that you can still find online today. It's called The Titicut Follies. And this documentary showed abuses of isolation, drugging, sleep deprivation, patients being forced to strip naked, and even some deaths from forced feeding and people who were too drugged to swallow food.
Yikes.
It was outlawed at the time, and now it has been released and actually won awards and things like that. And they said that they did reforms at Bridgewater State Hospital due to this documentary. However, that did not happen. In 1987, another major lawsuit was brought by the families of 7 inmates who died in the hospital. They sued not only the hospital, but also the state of Massachusetts, including then Governor Michael Dukakis, who ran for president.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. And they won millions of dollars in damages for these families. And it was again announced that, just like with the documentary, thanks to this lawsuit, we're going to reform the hospital. We're going to fix all these problems. We totally didn't know this was happening. But again, no reforms were made. There have been multiple other lawsuits in 2009, 2013, 2014 for people who were abused or died in similar manners at Bridgewater State Hospital. You might find it very interesting to know that the lawyer who brought the 1987 lawsuit against Michael Dukakis and won $3 million for these families, he happened to be the same lawyer that represented the Catholic priest abuse scandal victims and started the 9/11 fund for families of 9/11 victims. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should say Big Nine victims.
Yeah.
So in McLean, which ran Bridgewater, where all these scandals happened, in 2006, that president of McLean tried to unalive himself after it was exposed that he had been sexually involved with patients. Mm-hmm. So nothing has changed there. Basically, as far as we can tell, it's still just as bad as it was. And Timothy Leary, the infamous LSD distributor who also worked out of Harvard, had a network of schools that he would distribute LSD to for MK Ultra experiments, and that included McLean and Bridgewater Hospital. Also coming out of McLean was Dr. John Clark, who graduated from Harvard in 1953, right at the onset of MK Ultra. He worked at McLean and Bridgewater while working at Harvard from 1953 all the way through the 1990s. He was connected with the Jonestown mass unaliving. He actually testified in some of the proceedings about that and is considered an expert on cults. And he founded the American Family Foundation, which has been renamed the International Cultic Studies Association in 1979 with Raytheon founder Kay Barney and Louis Jolyon West.
So you've got what's that called? Military industrial complex mixed up in this now?
Yes,
Raytheon?
totally. Yes.
Psychiatric hospitals. I'm thinking of, the classic like psych hospital that's an old 1800s building.
Yeah.
And it's like storming and there's lightning and then it's just they're torturing patients inside and they're like doing electrotherapy.
Yeah.
And pretty much the worst place you could ever end up. Like that's my
fear. That is actually McLean.
Okay.
So McLean Hospital is over 200 years old.
Yeah.
And it was founded, it's named for, I forget the guy's first name, but a guy named McLean who was another like very prominent like politician. And it's not a city, it's like an unincorporated living area right outside DC by all the naval bases and all of that. It's the third most expensive place you can live in the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
The Bidens have lived there. The Obamas have lived there. All of the like top brass, like Pentagon guys live there. It's also called McLean. It's not a county. It's not a city. It's like a unincorporated area where these people live that's so expensive that it's basically impossible to live there unless you are one of these guys. And so this hospital was named after him. And yes, we have like Raytheon involved. I know this is a lot, you guys. So my plan is to like write this all up into an essay, cite everything and source it for you so that in case you think I'm crazy, you can go read that and check all my source material and see where I'm getting all this information from. And like, if you're listening to this going, whoa, that's like a lot, then you can kind of put it together that way. Cause it is a lot. It's like pretty bananas.
Britney's doctor, Timothy Benson, is basically like running Arkham asylums.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Places of horror.
Yeah.
And also doing what to her? Giving her injections, drugs? We don't know yet.
Yeah. We don't know. We know lithium.
Yeah.
And we know that she was so relieved when she found out he died that she dropped to her knees and thanked God.
Yeah.
So.
Poor Britney Jean.
I know. And Marilyn's name was Norma Jean.
Oh, yeah. So you were telling me about somebody named Archibald.
Yes.
Where does he fit into this?
So when we look at that lawyer I was telling you guys about. So when
What's
Bridgewater, his name is Eric McLeish.
McLeish.
Okay. Yes. MacLiesh.
Okay. So he's her lawyer for her conservatorship.
No, he's the lawyer for the lawsuit that was brought against Bridgewater by all of the patients who were like dying and being tortured there in 1987.
Uh-huh.
So not a lawyer for Britney, but a lawyer for families who wanted to bring a suit against McLean and Bridgewater because McLean owns and runs Bridgewater facility.
Did you ever see that American Horror Story with the
asylum?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think when I think of these places. It's just like a bunch of nurse ratchets that are evil.
Like, that's what it sounds like. Because I read through some of the like testimony of the parents, and like there was one lady that talked about how her son, who was schizophrenic, had been restrained and tied up for like years, and that he had deteriorated to the point where he had lost 40 some pounds. He could barely talk. They couldn't visit him very often. And when they did, he was in such terrible shape and totally drugged out of his mind. And these were the families that wanted to sue this place.
Mm-hmm.
So the attorney who said he would help them bring a class action lawsuit was Eric McLeish. He's a Boston area attorney, and he represented the Bridgewater families. That was 7 families in 1987. He represented some more families again later, I think in like 2011 for the same place. And he also represented the victims of the Catholic priest scandal in 1992. And he also started the Massachusetts Big 9 event fund for survivors of Big 9 victims, like their families.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 like massive lawsuits that would bring total public outrage and total public outcry against very helpless people that would have been some of the biggest cases of the last 40 years. It's the same attorney, which wouldn't be so weird, except you guys, that he is his father. So this attorney, Eric McLeish, his father was Roderick McLeish, who was a graduate of the University of Chicago, which is a Rockefeller institution. He was a journalist for CBS and NPR, and basically a propagandist.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't sound too bad, right? But then we look at Grandpa, the grandfather of Eric McLeish. His dad's dad was a Yale graduate, a Harvard graduate, a member of Skull and Bones. He worked for the Henry Luce Foundation and Fortune magazine, which is CIA funded and connected. He was the Librarian of Congress at the behest of FDR. So this was like World War II era and a little before that this guy was around. So he was Librarian of Congress. He helped develop the Research and Analysis branch of the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. He was the Assistant of War Information for the United States in World War II. He was the Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs, which was, again, a giant like propaganda government organization at that time. He represented the United States at the creation of UNESCO. If you guys don't know anything about UNESCO, they are like probably the worst arm of the UN as far as like culture creation, eugenics and like,
yeah, we talk about UNESCO because they sponsor It's a Small World at Disney.
oh,
And if you think of that in the
small world, like
yeah,
Bebop.
Small World. And then if you go to the UNESCO website, it's got a picture of a kid getting a stabby in their arm, and it says, what is it say?
Oh yeah, they're big pushers of that. They're big pushers of veganism.
Yeah.
They're big pushers of climate change stuff.
Yeah.
Anything that leads to Depop, UNESCO is basically behind it.
Yeah.
And this guy, Archibald MacLeish, the grandfather of this lawyer who's representing everyone who's a victim of this horrible stuff, he helped put together UNESCO and even contributed to its constitution. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner, which the Pulitzer Prize is another like, it's basically global elites giving other global elites a prize is what that is. He was the professor of rhetoric and oratory at Harvard. He was commissioned to write a poem about the Apollo 11 moon landing, which is what he won. I think that's what he won the Pulitzer for. Fake and gray poetry.
It always surprises me how much these guys think that they're some sort of like artist or poet.
They are. He was a big writer.
Yeah.
Bayes Lit Analyzer, love his channel. He knows about Archie. Maybe I can get him to do like a show on that.
Karl Marx, he was a great poet.
Yes, he did. Oh, this guy was also very Marxist sympathetic.
Okay.
There were like the Red Scare people did not like him, but he was just he was incredibly powerful. And as you can tell, he was everywhere during this time. And he was, he wrote the Apollo 11 moon landing poem, which was commissioned by the New York Times. So in short, this guy was a master propagandist and one of the architects of the New World Order. And his grandson is the lawyer who's representing class action lawsuits of victims who are victims of government stuff, basically. So essentially, they have a guy who handles all these lawsuits on their behalf, is what it looks like to me, because he would be in charge of when attorneys file like discovery for the other side, like where they get all the files with all the information. So it'd be up to him what gets put into court, what goes on the public record. And it seems to me it's basically his job to get damages for these people and make sure justice is done, you guys. Don't worry about those Catholic priests. Don't worry about the abusive mental hospitals. Don't worry about the Big 9 event, because those victims all have justice and everything is fine now. So just don't worry about it. Just go on with your life. It's like, what are the chances? Oh, and the other thing that Archibald MacLeish, his father, so now we're talking about this attorney's great-great-grandfather. This is obviously very generational. He helped co-found the University of Chicago with John D. Rockefeller. And his great-great-granddaughter is actress Laura Dern, who also has all kinds of other big connections. So it's like a never-ending.
That is quite a rabbit hole.
It is.
Corruption in the legal system, which is so easy to point out.
Yeah.
And this is how Britney is tied up with all of these corrupt conservator people.
Yeah.
Con men. What's her name? Lou Taylor.
Basically at the very highest levels, they've got people, and it filters all the way down to lawyers, to judges, to doctors, to conservators, to talent agents. They have their little fingers in the pie everywhere that you could possibly look, which is why it's like, how would you ever get out?
Well, this reminds me of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which I'm going to ask you about in 1 second. But now that the dating world has become so toxic. People are waking up to personality disorders and serious like integrity disorders, narcissistic abuse. This is getting in mainstream. MK Ultra like tactics are being used by people in the dating world when they think they're doing game or red pill. I read Fritz Springmeier along with The Game by Neil Strauss, which kind of kicked off this whole thing, and show you step by step how they are teaching you how to literally traumatize a person, a woman, to get her will and spirit broken down so low that she will give you sex for nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you just move on to the next one and it's fun.
So damaging people has become mainstream. And through this, people who are realizing what's happening, they are becoming familiar with terms, psychological terms that we have always been talking about. If you read Springmeier or whatever, I read that in like 2007 or so. So I already knew what a trigger was. I knew what trauma bonding was, gaslighting, PTSD, projection, and so on. But now girls are talking about this and they know the terms because of the people they were dating. Are using MK Ultra on them. Right.
But it's like the whole society has been mass traumatized. I mean, if people will watch these videos we're doing and they'll be like, but why? Like, why would there be such an elaborate conspiracy to control a pop star? Like, what's the point of that? Well, the point of it is, why do you think they do these big elaborate tours and shows and put these videos out and put these songs out? Because it implants all these ideas. It changes people's perception of normal. It changes people's perception of, I mean, all you got to do is look right now. My 21-year-old daughter was just home visiting, telling me about all her different friends that now have OnlyFans. They're like 19, 20, 21 years old, and there's going to be forever pictures of their most intimate body parts online, and they're for like, $40 a month or something stupid. And it's totally acceptable. Sometimes their parents support it. It's like, it's just changed the entire worldview of people.
Well,
to continue putting people like Britney and Beyonce and Cardi B and all these different people out there, that's like the top obvious layer, right? To normalize this aggressive female sexuality, this idea that women are just begging to get choked and abused because they love it. They secretly want it. And then you have all the layers of programming that Jamie has been doing such a great job of explaining to you, like the symbolism and how they sneak like subliminal stuff into this, and they kind of traumatize the public with this stuff.
Yeah, it's a microcosm, macrocosm thing.
Yeah.
And sad to say, Britney was integral in this sexual milieu of getting girls to be overtly sexual. And I was going to say, I wish we could see something from her that was not that.
Yeah.
I mean, she's proven, yes, you are very sexy. You are a very good dancer. But it's kind of blasé now. And I want to see what's inside Britney, not what's on outside Britney. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And something funny I just read, it was a video I was watching from a musician I really like, who's not like super mainstream popular, but he's mega talented. And he was talking about how they've done, like, according to all the Nielsen SoundScan stuff, old music is officially more popular than new music now. And I think that's part of the reason why. I think people would rather listen to big band or like 50s doo-wop or something like that, because we're all sick to death of back up your ass and let me do stuff to you. Like, how much of that can you really listen to?
Well, yeah, because when I was watching that Femme Fatale thing, I was just like, I've already seen everyone's butt. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I've seen
all of the butts all of the time.
I don't need to see that anymore. It's not even.
Well, and now it's getting so absurd that you see all these big stars getting so much injected stuff put in their butt that they literally just look absurd. They look ridiculous. They look like they're walking around with a full diaper on. It doesn't look like a nice butt. It looks like an absurd. Well, I talked about this in my my MK Ultra piece I did about the feminization and the sissy hypno PORN stuff.
Yeah.
Women have been made into this absurd caricature. You have drag queens, which is just an absurd, clownish caricature of what it means to be a woman. Every trans person that's really popular, none of them look like you. None of them look like me. They all look like Anna Nicole Smith or a stripper or a hooker or something like that. They are always like this overly super hypersexualized version of a woman. They're never dressed like a mom in sweatpants. None of these people are transitioning to be like a normal woman. They're all transitioning to be a little sex puppet. And so femininity now has just become oversized huge butts, the giant fake eyelash extensions, the ridiculously long hair extensions and wigs, the enormous fake boobs, the huge overinflated lips. It's like they take any feminine characteristic and blow it up to the point that it looks like a ridiculous clown.
It's Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah.
Remember that character?
Yes, I do.
I mean, that's what literally the archetype is.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
But even the big booty stuff, like, do you remember the Super Bowl with J-Lo and Shakira?
Yeah.
That was like the year of the butt, because then
Yeah.
Lizzo did a thing and there was like a giant inflatable butt at it was like Grammys or VMAs, one of those. It was just like it was big as a house.
Yeah.
Just
and
butt.
Now you even have protesters twerk now. If we want to protest something, we're going to twerk. What? It's just gotten so absurd, but everything is so hypersexual. And it's always like my stream that I did with Church of the Eternal Logos, we were talking about this because I was like, why butts? Why? Like, what is and he said that in occult circles, that is the universal vagina, basically, which I know that's gross. Sorry to be gross, but it's a universe, and it always is involved in sex magic stuff. Like Crowley stuff always ends up being about that.
Yeah.
It just always ends up being about butts, man.
It's a black magic sacrament.
Yes.
And Crowley dreamed of birthing creatures out of butts that were slimy and bloody with like bodily fluids, and it's just super gross. Like,
yeah, and like
ceremonial magic, like it down at the bottom of the abyss, is disgusting.
Yeah, Jack Parsons was super into that, right? All that stuff too. And Jamie and I noticed this picture, guys, from Britney's Instagram. Can you
oh, the rocket.
I can't get it to focus. Oh, there you can kind of see it. If you go look, I think it's still there. It's a hand with red nail polish, and that's a rocket blasting off.
Yeah.
And the hand is around the rocket in a very suggestive manner with the clouds below looking like something else. And I sent that to Jamie and I was like, what is going on here? And the first thing she said was, it reminds me of Jack Parsons. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. She's so good at that, you guys. You don't know. You can show her a picture and she'll like instantly put things together that I wouldn't.
Yeah. Parsons was in the OTO. So the father of modern rocketry was doing sex magic rituals in Pasadena and in the desert and summoning demons and aliens and opening portals. And Werner von Braun, the Rocketeer, was working with Disney, and he was also a NAZI mind control scientist. Anyway, we're getting
it's all we are going on our little conspiracy tangent, but the stuff is all very connected. It is all like so in the mainstream pop culture now that you almost can't look at anything without seeing it. If you have seen it, you know.
The Fritz Springmeier books, I can't even stress enough how you need to get these and read both of them, because they are the they live glasses of pop culture. Like, once you read these, you will understand what you're looking at and why things aren't just weird or avant-garde or creative. They are following this script. So we're coming up on 2 hours, but real fast, I want you to tell us about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, because it goes into what you're talking about with the McLeishes and the control opposition and the lawyers and
Yes.
everything.
Yes, and how they can perpetuate this nonsense.
Yeah.
So the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was founded by Peter and Pamela Frade.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a daughter who, as an adult, claimed that she had remembered being abused by her dad. They both completely said, that's not true. It didn't happen. And what happened was so it came out through like these proceedings where the daughter had made these accusations that Peter and Pamela grew up as step siblings in the same home and are now married, a married couple. So that's bizarre. Yeah, and so they like stayed a unified front and insisted that this abuse never happened. And they said that because these false accusations were made against them, that they were going to create this False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which was going to help people who were accused of abuse by their children saying that they had memories of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the people involved in this project, Ralph Underwager, who was, this guy he reminds me of Lou Taylor and her church husband. He's a minister and a psychologist and the director of the Institute for Psychological Therapies, which he founded in 1974. A controversial statement was made by him and his wife. They did an interview with the Journal of PEDO stuff in the Netherlands, where apparently you can have that magazine. You can't have that here, but you can have it in the Netherlands. And they were being interviewed and they made a statement saying that they didn't think there was necessarily anything wrong with PEDO stuff and that you could have a perfectly healthy and normal man-boy relationship. And the wife was just like, well, I mean, the only concern I have is that these gay men tend to be really into the kid when he's young. And then once he hits like 15 or 16, they tend to dump him and move on to another young man. And I just think that that's like probably the only problem with it. And the guy said that he felt it was all part of God's plan, that God wants that for you. It makes you happy. If it makes the man happy and the boy happy, then who are we to say it's wrong? It's part of God's plan, because he's a minister. And he was like, as a minister, I think this is perfectly fine. He helped found the False Memory Syndrome Foundation with Peter and Pamela, brother, sister, husband, wife. So that's a little suspicious right off the bat, but these guys they basically ended up being a lobbying group, and they would go to Congress or different state legislatures to try to get laws for child protection overturned. They would say that, I mean, CPS is not a great organization. I'm suspicious of them myself, that they would try to say that all CPS cases were just attempts to steal kids, and that there's no such thing as remembering traumatized memories, that it wasn't a thing, right? So they put together this scientific advisory board. Among the people on the scientific advisory board was Aaron T. Beck, who is the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, which interestingly is where the creeper lady we were just talking about, who came up with the dialectical behavior therapy, that came out of this guy's work. So he was the father of cognitive behavioral therapy. He went to Yale and Brown University and got a PhD from Yale Medical School in 1946. He, what else? Oh, he had military service. He was the chief of neuropsychiatry at Valley Forge Army Hospital from 52 to 54, which again, MK Ultra Hospital.
Years.
Huh?
MK
Yep, total
Ultra years.
MK Ultra years. Valley Forge Army Hospital was an MK Ultra hospital. They really started it with Army guys. Even Jolly and West started on an Army base experimenting on Army guys because the military owns you. So these lower rung Army guys, they felt like they could do whatever they wanted to them. So yeah, he had a wife and kids who also were in powerful government positions. Ernest Hilgard was a Yale graduate from 1930. He was into hypnosis and wrote psych textbooks about divided consciousness and silent observer theory and dual personalities.
There you go.
Paul R. McHugh was part of a panel set up by the Roman Catholic Church to look into the priest abuse scandals. He was on the Harvard Medical School board and raised near Boston. He did his residency in neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital, in an area of the hospital that was run by McLean. He went to Walter Reed Army Hospital and was the professor of psychology at Cornell, Cornell is like Harvard and Cornell were the two biggest MK Ultra schools where most of everything came out of those two. He founded the Born Behavioral Research Lab, which you also cannot find anything about now. Nothing. I took like days looking for anything about Born Research Lab, and it was closed down and has disappeared. So I think that's another like front lab. They did a lot of these. They would set up a research lab that was basically a front, and then when they were done, they would erase it from history. And let's see. Oh, he was on George W. Bush's Council on Bioethics and played a role in the defense of notorious Catholic priest Joseph Maskell, who was one of the worst offenders. Mm-hmm. So these are the people who are on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation board who are going to tell you all about how kids don't remember trauma and abuse.
So this is the ultimate gaslighting that we're talking about.
Yes, this is where you take the actual people who are doing the stuff, you form a foundation that's going to protect you from the stuff they're doing to you.
Yeah. And they're so good at projection too. Like I noticed a lot of this on Britney's team conservatorship. They're
team
always,
con.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're master projectors and they will always accuse you of doing what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. And so there's just a couple more people on this scientific advisory board, you guys. It's the scientific advisory board of scientists. Trust the science. Okay. This is an early version of Trust the Science. We had Dr. Ulrich Neisser, who was a German who was brought over under Operation Paperclip and got a doctorate in experimental psychology from Harvard in 1956. He went into the subfield of psychophysics and instructed at Harvard, spent the rest of his year at Cornell, published a case study of the Watergate testimony and challenged the memory of one of those witnesses, and also contributed to the book, The Bell Curve, which is all about how Black people aren't smart.
Oh, man.
Yeah, a really nice guy there. Totally eugenicist, NAZI doctor who came over here and started doing crazy, weird experimental psychology exactly during the peak years of MK Ultra under Operation Paperclip. And then my final one on this scientific advisory board is Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. She was mentioned by two women who were prostitutes who claimed to be victims of MK Ultra, who gave a 1995 testimony in a hearing by the Clintons Committee on Human Radiation Experiments. So this is another thing they do. The government will find out that another part of the government's doing something awful that they shouldn't be doing, and they'll immediately put together a committee to get to the bottom of it and reassure the public that they've investigated and they've held, whoever responsible. So the Clintons,
you remember the Big Nine Commission?
Oh yeah,
right. And we investigated ourselves and we found we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, and they do the same thing with the IRS, and they did the same thing with the Kennedy assassination. They do it all the time. It's their favorite thing to do. They did it with MK Ultra. MK Ultra had the Rockefeller Committee investigated MK Ultra. Okay, guys. Mm-hmm. So yes, the Clintons put together a committee on human radiation experiments because apparently there was some use of radiation involved in MK Ultra too, and some other bioweapons type of things they were doing. So these two women testified that they were victims in MK Ultra experiments, and that this doctor, Elizabeth Loftus, was involved in this stuff. And she had connections to Louis Jolyon West, Dr. Martin Orne, who was called by Harvey Weinstein's defense.
I remember that guy, Martin T. Orne.
Yes. So, and they helped assemble a board that gave testimony. Yeah, these two women, Claudia Mullen and Christine DeNicola. So it's the exact people who are doing the stuff are going to form some kind of board or committee or foundation to investigate the stuff and assure you that they've taken care of it. And then they'll have their lawyer sue and get damages so that there's justice done, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's not a problem.
This is what I really like, that everybody is catching on to narcissism, but they need to extend it. I say this all the time to your government. It's not just your
Yes.
ex-boyfriend. This is
Right.
your president, it's your congressman, it's your senators. It's like all of these old coots who are running this thing are total narcissist psychopaths,
Yeah.
right?
Who do you think gets to the highest positions on these things? Who do you think, how do you think a hospital like Bridgewater gets away with this for decades, even though they get sued again and again, and people keep dying in their custody, and they, every 10 years they go, oh, we found abuses and we fixed them, we promise. Like, do you think that the people who run those places care if
Well,
it continues?
can you guess what the third leading cause of death in the US is? It's not
Is it
COVID.
is it medical
Yeah,
malpractice? Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah. And
bronze medal for killing people, it's hospitals.
yeah.
So,
And that should not surprise anybody with the certain medical interventions they've been pushing the last 2 years, with the food pyramid, with, I mean, there's a huge battle right now going on in psychiatry over the fact that some actual scientists did a bunch of studies and found that the whole chemical imbalance theory of depression and mental illness is baloney.
yeah.
It's total bullcrap. There's no evidence for it. There hasn't been for a long time. I've been saying this for years, but they finally actually have like scientific studies that say, wait, this is all baloney. We're handing out SSRIs, we're giving out all these different drugs, and we don't have any mechanism. We don't have any evidence that shows that this is what causes it or that these drugs are what cure it.
Yeah.
But guys, if you look into all this research that I'm going to put out there for you on my Substack, these drugs that everyone is on now came out of MK Ultra experiments. All the SSRIs, the ADHD stuff, the anti-anxiety meds, all this stuff was crap they were fooling around with to see if they could mind control people. And now it's the cure to your depression, and give it to your kids.
Yeah, they're
putting
like
kids on it.
Oops, serotonin doesn't have anything to do with this when all of it is about your serotonin reuptake or whatever. Like, leave your serotonin floating where it is. But I think a lot of the people who have depression are being narcissistically abused.
Yes.
And if you get away from toxic people, you feel better.
Yes.
And you don't need meds.
Another big piece to that puzzle is around the same time that they started doing all these things, they changed all the divorce laws and made no fault divorce a thing. The divorce rate went sky high. All these kids are being raised in single mom homes with mom's boyfriend. If you look into the statistics on that, children are like 40 times more likely to be abused by mom's boyfriend than their dad.
I heard
it removes the protector from the home.
Yeah.
So now the mom is vulnerable and the kids are vulnerable. And so the mom is depressed, the kids are messed up, the kids don't do well in school, everyone's dysfunctional, so we put them all on drugs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, nothing against step parents, but that dynamic is not healthy. Like, it's not ideal. And especially the culture we have now, like you said, I heard it was worse than that. Like, I heard it's like 100 times more likely to be abused.
It might be that the chance of death is 40 times more, but that the chance of abuse is like 200 times more. I tweeted about it and made everybody really mad. So I should go back and check my own tweets. But it's insane, the numbers.
I know.
It's crazy, the numbers.
We're rambling now, and we're not even getting to this testimony. We're going to have to do a part 3. But what was I going to say about step parents? Oh, that's why, like, all the hippies and stuff, they would push like communal living.
Yes.
Tiny houses. And like, even in Soviet Russia, they would have like communal living, or like multiple families live in one apartment and they have their. That is so dangerous because
it's very conducive to abuse.
Exactly. I'm like, do you know how much cheating and molesting is going to go on when you live in a commune?
Tons. That's basically all that happens. Which is why, like, I know somebody in the comments last time was like, you keep teasing us with this book that's coming out. I know, guys, I take like a year to research before I put out a book, because when you make claims like this, you have to be rock solid. You have to have airtight evidence. You can't go around saying that crazy stuff's going on and not have any proof. So if I'm going to put out a book, it's going to have like the best possible, most airtight research I can get on it. But the people who were behind the commune ideas in Russia and Soviet Russia were people who were also running secret cults, secret sex clubs, where they would have their own children come. Like, it's really crazy stuff. The people who come up with these ideas, and of course, it's always because they want to help you. They want to help the poor. They want to help women who are struggling. They want to help children who are struggling. So we're going to put them in like these horrific situations that are super conducive to abuse.
Mm-hmm. And they're just like, share, man, share, brother, share everything.
Yeah.
Share your
wife, share your wife, share your kid. Yeah. And, but so if you're looking at the Britney thing and you haven't gone down these rabbit holes and you're like, this seems crazy. It seems like, why would they do all this to one pop star? And why would there be this elaborate thing going on? Like, is it same way that most people look at these types of situations? They just project their own goodness onto it and can't understand that other people would do this.
Exactly.
But to these people who do these things, you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's stupid to be good. If you were smart, they invert everything, right? They turn it inside out and upside down, and they think that what they're doing is the good thing. They think that it's ultimately like neutral or good. They don't think it's bad. And this is how the system keeps people like Britney under control. Once you hear everything that we just said, it makes a lot more sense how it wouldn't even be hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even hard.
They think they have transcended good and evil.
Yeah.
That's what the checkerboard floor is about. The magician is above black and white, right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be a good person when it suits them.
Yeah.
Or a bad person when it suits them. So they can do the right thing if it benefits them, or they can screw somebody over. It makes no never mind if they're getting ahead.
Yeah. And it's hard for normal people to imagine that you could purposely traumatize a child to the point that you fracture their mind into like compartments and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But these people don't, it does not elicit the emotional response from them that it would from you.
Because their frontal lobe is damaged. Like if you look into the neuroscience of narcissistic personality disorder and things like that, it's, their cortex, empathy, conscience, like higher emotions is arrested development or just like dead.
Yeah, I have a close family member who is one of these people that I grew up with, and that person once said to me, like, I would want to be a good mom and a good person and stuff like you, but I just don't have those feelings. I just don't. Like, I can't make myself have them.
Mm-hmm.
I can only feel when I'm upset, and me saying something that upsets you, like, I don't get it. I can't connect that. So it's, and like I've been told by therapists and doctors and stuff that there's nothing you can do about that. There's no pill. There's no like real therapy or anything.
I've heard that, and I almost agree with it, except for it takes away free will, and I think anybody can repent and learn to at least go through the motions, even if you don't feel it.
Yeah.
Not lie. When you're lying, you cannot like con people. You can get better.
Well, and that's true. And the other thing about that that's super important to remember is these people know that evil exists.
Yeah.
Clearly. They clearly believe, maybe not all of them, but a good portion of them believe in a satanic Luciferian type of power. They believe in evil. And if you know evil is real, and if you know that magic works, then you know that God is real, and you know that goodness is real.
Mm-hmm.
So that really kind of takes away the excuse. I mean, even if you are somebody that has like a brain issue where you're not like naturally inclined to empathy or something like that, if you know that there's such a thing as evil, then you know that there's such a thing as good.
Like I've seen narcissists on TikTok and stuff, and they're like, I know I have this disorder, but I choose to, do the right thing instead of using my abilities for evil. And speaking of that, and we're going to close right now, and we're going to put a pin in it and do it again. If you'll have to come back. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I felt a little bad last week because we were ripping on Madonna. And
Oh, why'd you feel bad about
I was
that?
thinking, I was like, she's probably a victim of this too. You know, she's the Madonna, like the Madonna whore dichotomy.
Yeah.
And she was probably raised in an abusive environment. She's Catholic. She probably has gone through all of this rigmarole, and it's not right to just like have all this sympathy for Britney and save Britney. And we also have to be a little easy on Madonna, because even though she seems, you know, like a Disney villain,
Yeah.
right? She's like Cruella or something, but we still have hope that, you know, she can repent too.
Yeah.
And we pray for her, and we don't want to condemn anybody before it's all over,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
So
I would,
Madonna,
it would be interesting to try to do a deep dive on Madonna. I don't know how much you could, like, I've looked into her a little, but I
yeah,
haven't done like a super deep dive. I wonder what that would turn out.
yeah,
But
because
she was
her,
involved with some really crazy people early on, like Sean Penn and some of those people.
yeah,
So
you remember that classic conspiracy picture where she had like the eye in the pyramid on her jacket,
yeah.
and she came out with a bang and the sexiness, and she had that book, and she was another Marilyn Monroe
Yes.
personification.
Tons of pictures of her with the hair and the makeup and the
Yeah.
dresses, and she did the video.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of Marilyn Monroe mirroring and equivalency and stuff like that with her.
Mhm.
So maybe.
So thank you guys for coming to Britney Part 2, and we will wrap it up next time. We're going to talk about her actual conservatorship testimony that was recent, like 2019. We're going to talk about some more videos. We're going to talk about some documentaries. The Free Britney Project Rose we didn't get to. That was super weird. And her Las Vegas, all of this stuff. We're going to wrap it up next time. So thank you all for coming, and good night.